What happens when betrayal leads you straight into the arms of the devil himself? Evelyn Carter walked into her boyfriend's mansion, expecting answers. What she found instead was her entire world burning to ash, her boyfriend tangled with her best friend in silk sheets that cost more than her rent. But she didn't cry. She didn't beg. She simply turned to leave, unaware that Victor Bellini, the city's most feared mafia kingpin and her boyfriend's father, stood watching from the shadows. And in her silent defiance, he saw something he hadn't seen in decades: strength worthy of his world. What happened next would shatter 3 lives forever. If you want to know how revenge can taste sweeter than love, stay with me until the very end. And don't forget to hit that like button and comment which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Evelyn Carter had always believed that heartbreak arrived with warning signs: a distant phone call, a forgotten anniversary, the slow fade of attention that people talked about in therapy sessions and late-night confessions with wine-drunk friends. She was wrong. Heartbreak didn't whisper. It detonated. The Bellini mansion stood like a monument to old money and older secrets, its stone facade glowing amber under the early November sunset. Evelyn had been here dozens of times over the past 18 months, always as Noah's girlfriend, always feeling slightly out of place among the marble columns and Renaissance paintings that probably cost more than her student loans. Tonight felt different. Tonight the house seemed to loom over her with something close to malice. She clutched her phone tighter as she approached the heavy oak doors. Noah hadn't answered her calls in 3 days. 3 days of silence after their argument about his business associates, men in expensive suits who looked at her the way wolves studied sheep. She'd asked too many questions. He'd deflected with charm and expensive dinners until she'd finally confronted him about the rumors, the whispers that followed his family name like smoke. The door was unlocked. That should have been her first warning. The foyer stretched before her in cathedral-like grandeur, all vaulted ceilings and Italian tile that echoed her footsteps like accusations. The house felt empty, though she knew it never truly was. The Bellini family kept staff, security, people who moved through shadows, and kept secrets better than priests. "Noah?" Her voice bounced off the walls, unanswered. She climbed the grand staircase, her hand sliding along the mahogany banister that had been polished to mirror shine. The second-floor hallway stretched in both directions, doors closed like sealed tombs. She knew which one was Noah's private suite. She'd been there before, though never without invitation, never without him greeting her with that boyish smile that made her forget why the Bellini name made hardened men cross the street. The door stood slightly ajar. Later, Evelyn would remember this moment with crystalline clarity. The way the hallway seemed to narrow, the way her heartbeat suddenly filled her ears like thunder, the way some primal part of her brain screamed to turn around and leave. But she was 26 years old and had been raised to believe that love meant fighting for what mattered, that relationships required courage and confrontation. So she pushed the door open. The room smelled like expensive cologne and betrayal. Late afternoon light slanted through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the scene with brutal clarity. The massive bed with its silk sheets the color of champagne, the scattered clothes forming a trail from the door to the mattress. And there, tangled together in post-coital abandon, were Noah Bellini and Jessica Chen, her boyfriend, her best friend since college. Evelyn didn't scream. The sound that came from her throat was smaller than that, more animal, a wounded noise that she'd never heard herself make before. It was the sound of something fundamental breaking, like the crack of ice before it gives way beneath your feet. Noah's head snapped up first. His dark hair was disheveled, his face flushed, and for one perfect second, he looked like exactly what he was. A spoiled 28-year-old caught doing something he knew would destroy someone he claimed to love. "Evie," he started, scrambling for the sheet. Jessica sat up slower, her expression morphing from shock to something harder, something that looked almost like satisfaction. "This isn't what it looks like," she said, and the sheer audacity of the cliché almost made Evelyn laugh. "Really?" Evelyn's voice came out steady, cold as winter steel. "Because it looks like my boyfriend is screwing my best friend in his family's mansion. Let me explain." Noah was on his feet now, wrapping the sheet around his waist like it could somehow preserve his dignity. "How long?" Evelyn heard herself ask. The question felt important somehow, though she wasn't sure why it mattered. Betrayal was betrayal whether it lasted a week or a year. Jessica spoke before Noah could. "Does it matter? You were never right for him, Evelyn. You're too ordinary, too safe. She said safe like it was an insult, a curse word. Noah needs someone who understands his world. And you understand it. Evelyn turned to her former friend, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. Jessica had always been ambitious, always angling for the next party, the next connection, the next opportunity to climb social ladders that Evelyn hadn't even known existed. You understand the violence, the blood money, the fact that his family... Careful. Noah's voice hardened in a way she'd never heard before. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Evelyn took a step backward, suddenly aware that she was alone in a mansion belonging to people who made their enemies disappear. I know enough. I know that your father runs half the crime in this city. I know that your business associates are murderers and drug dealers. I know that you've been lying to me about who you really are since the day we met. Then why are you here? Noah demanded. And there it was, the crack in his mask, the flash of something cruel beneath the charm. If I'm so terrible, if my family disgusts you, why did you come? Because I was stupid enough to think you might be different. Evelyn's throat burned. She refused to cry, not here, not in front of them. I thought maybe you were trying to get away from it all, that we were building something real. Jessica laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was like glass breaking. Real? Evelyn, nothing about you two was real. You were his rebellion, his little walk on the safe side. A nice girl from a nice family doing nice nonprofit work. You were always temporary. The words hit like physical blows, each one finding its mark with surgical precision. Because somewhere deep down, Evelyn had always suspected this truth, that she was too ordinary for Noah Bellini, that their relationship had an expiration date written in invisible ink, that men who wore $10,000 watches and drove cars that cost more than houses didn't end up with social workers who bought their clothes at outlet malls. I'm done, Evelyn said quietly. We're done. Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't send your people to check on me. Whatever this was, it's over. She turned to leave before the tears could come, before her composure could crack completely. The hallway seemed longer now, stretching like something from a nightmare. She focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on maintaining the dignity she had left. Evie, wait! Noah's voice followed her, but she didn't turn around. She was halfway down the grand staircase when she felt it, that crawling sensation of being watched. Her hand tightened on the banister as her eyes swept the foyer, empty, silent. But the feeling persisted, raising goosebumps along her arms. You walk away from betrayal better than most men I've known. Evelyn's head snapped toward the voice. He stood in the doorway of what she knew was the library. A man she'd only seen in passing, only glimpsed at family gatherings where she'd felt perpetually out of place. Victor Bellini, Noah's father, the patriarch, the kingpin. He was taller than she'd realized, or maybe he just filled space differently than other people. Late 40s, with silver threading through dark hair that was swept back from a face that looked carved from marble. All hard angles and sharp edges softened only slightly by what might have been cruel beauty in his youth. He wore a three-piece suit like armor, perfectly tailored, perfectly pressed, the kind of expensive that whispered rather than shouted. But it was his eyes that held her frozen on the stairs. Dark eyes that had seen too much, done too much, eyes that belonged to a man who made life and death decisions before breakfast and slept soundly afterward. Mr. Bellini, she managed, her voice smaller than she wanted. Victor. He moved toward her with the fluid grace of a predator, unhurried but purposeful. Mr. Bellini was my father, and he's been dead for 20 years, though I suspect he'd have appreciated your composure just now. He always said the best steel is forged in the hottest fires. Evelyn descended the last few steps, instinct telling her that staying above him would be seen as either defiant or foolish. I didn't know anyone was here. This is my home. I'm always here, in one way or another. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that probably had a name in a language she didn't speak. I heard raised voices. I came to investigate. Found quite the illuminating scene. Heat flooded her cheeks. How long were you watching? Long enough to see you demonstrate more backbone than my son has shown his entire life. Victor tilted his head slightly, studying her with an intensity that made her want to look away. She didn't. Some stubborn part of her refused to give him that satisfaction. long enough to see that he's an even bigger fool than I thought. I should go. Evelyn moved to step around him. His hand caught her wrist, not roughly, but firmly enough to stop her. His skin was warm, his grip precise, the touch of a man who knew exactly how much pressure to apply. I have a proposition for you. Every alarm bell in Evelyn's head started ringing. I'm not interested in whatever... Revenge, Victor said simply, releasing her wrist. Real revenge. Not gossip or social media posts or slashed tires. I'm talking about the kind of vengeance that will hollow out my son from the inside. The kind he'll feel every single day for the rest of his life. Evelyn's breath caught. Why would you want to hurt your own son? Because he needs to learn that actions have consequences. Victor's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those dark eyes, something that might have been disappointment or some anger or some complex cocktail of both. Because he's been coddled and protected his entire life, and it's made him weak, reckless, stupid. And because what he did to you, he paused, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly, shows a fundamental lack of respect that I find intolerable. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you work for Hope Harbor, the nonprofit that helps trafficking victims. I know you grew up in Portland, that your father was a teacher and your mother was a nurse, both deceased. I know you have a master's degree in social work from Columbia and $73,000 in student loan debt. I know you drive a 10-year-old Honda, live in a fifth-floor walk-up in Queens, and volunteer at the animal shelter on weekends. Victor said all of this in the same tone someone might use to discuss the weather. I make it my business to know about anyone who spends time in my home, especially anyone who gets close to my family. The casual invasion of her privacy should have terrified her. Instead, Evelyn felt something else, a cold realization that she'd been swimming in waters far deeper than she'd understood. You had me investigated. Thoroughly. You came back clean, which is more than I can say for the last 3 women Noah brought around. Victor gestured toward the sitting room. Walk with me. 5 minutes. If you don't like what I have to say, you'll never see me again. Every rational bone in Evelyn's body screamed at her to refuse, to walk out the door and never look back. But something else stirred beneath the shock and hurt. Something darker. Something that wanted to see Noah's face when he realized the magnitude of what he'd lost. 5 minutes, she heard herself say. The sitting room was all leather and dark wood, bookshelves lined with first editions that were probably worth more than her annual salary. Victor moved to the bar, pouring amber liquid into 2 crystal glasses without asking if she wanted one. He handed her a glass, then gestured for her to sit. Evelyn remained standing. What exactly are you proposing? Marriage. He said it like he was suggesting coffee. Evelyn actually laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. You can't be serious. I'm always serious when it comes to business. And make no mistake, this would be a business arrangement. Victor took a measured sip of his drink. You marry me. You take the Bellini name. You become part of this family in the most official, most public way possible. That's insane. She stopped, realizing she'd been about to say, old enough to be my father, to a man who could probably have her killed with a phone call. 22 years your senior. Yes, I'm aware. Victor didn't seem offended. But I'm also wealthy, powerful, and capable of giving you a life most people only dream about. More importantly, I can give you what you really want right now. Revenge so complete, so devastating, that your ex-boyfriend will spend the rest of his life regretting what he threw away. By marrying you, his father? Evelyn shook her head. That's not revenge. That's psychological warfare. Exactly. Victor's smile was blade thin. Noah has spent his entire life competing with me for power, respect, legacy. Now imagine his humiliation when the woman he betrayed, the woman he considered too ordinary for his world, becomes his stepmother. When she sits at the head of this table, when she bears the Bellini name and commands the respect he takes for granted. The cruelty of it took Evelyn's breath away. Why would you do that to your own son? Because he needs to learn that his actions matter, that he can't simply charm his way out of consequences. Victor set down his glass with deliberate precision. And because you intrigue me, Evelyn Carter, you walked in on a scene that would have sent most women into hysterics, and you left with your head high and your dignity intact. That kind of composure is rare, valuable. I'm not some prize to be won. No, you're not. You're a woman who's been wronged. who deserves better than crying into her pillow while the people who hurt her move on without consequence. Victor moved closer, and Evelyn forced herself not to retreat. I'm offering you power, protection, a position in a world that usually chews up and spits out people like you. All I ask in return is that you play the role convincingly. Play the role, Evelyn repeated. You mean pretend to love you? Love has nothing to do with this. I'm talking about a partnership. You'd live here, attend family functions, present the image of a devoted wife. In exchange, you'd have access to resources most people can't imagine. Want to expand Hope Harbor's reach? Done. Want to wipe out your student loans? Consider it handled. Want to ensure that no one, and I mean no one, ever hurts you again? His eyes glittered like dark ice. That's what being a Bellini guarantees. Evelyn's mind spun. This was madness. Criminal madness. You didn't marry into the Mafia to get revenge on an ex-boyfriend. You didn't tie yourself to a man like Victor Bellini, a man whose business card probably had a body count on the back. What about what I want long-term, she asked. What happens when I want out, when I want a real relationship with someone I actually choose? We'd establish terms, a timeline. This doesn't have to be forever, though I reserve the right to renegotiate if circumstances change. Victor paused, his expression unreadable. But I'll be honest with you, Evelyn. The moment you take my name, your life changes permanently. You'll see things, know things, be part of things that will make you understand why people fear the Bellini family. There's no going back to who you were before. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to give you informed consent. He said it so matter-of-factly that Evelyn almost laughed again. If you say yes to this, you need to understand what you're accepting. The danger, the violence that exists at the edges of my world. The fact that my enemies will see you as leverage, and my allies will test you to see if you're worthy of the name. And if I fail those tests, you won't. Victor said it with absolute certainty. I've survived in this business for 25 years by reading people accurately. You have something most people lack, the ability to adapt without losing yourself. That's what makes you perfect for this. Evelyn looked down at the untouched drink in her hand, watching light refract through the crystal. Upstairs, Noah was probably spinning some explanation to Jessica, or maybe they were laughing about her dramatic exit. Tomorrow, they'd continue their affair without consequence, without guilt, without any understanding of what they'd destroyed. The thought ignited something dark and fierce in her chest. If I did this, and I'm not saying I will, what would the actual arrangement look like? Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, like someone else was asking the question. Victor's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted almost imperceptibly, like a chess player recognizing a worthy opponent. We'd marry within the month. Quick engagement, very private ceremony, though the announcement would be extremely public. You'd move into the east wing of this house, separate quarters with complete privacy. We'd share certain spaces for appearances' sake, dinners, family gatherings, public events. I'd expect discretion, loyalty, and the ability to handle yourself in difficult situations. And in return, financial security beyond what you've ever imagined, protection from anyone who might wish you harm, access to resources that could expand your nonprofit work exponentially. Imagine what you could do for trafficking victims with actual funding and political connections. Victor enumerated each point like contract terms, and the satisfaction of watching Noah realize exactly what he lost. What about affection? Intimacy? Evelyn felt her cheeks heat but forced herself to ask. Are you expecting? No. Victor cut her off cleanly. Unless you wanted that, this would be a marriage in name only. I'm not interested in coercing anyone into my bed, Evelyn. If physical intimacy ever became part of our arrangement, it would be because we both wanted it, not because you felt obligated. The answer should have reassured her. Instead, it raised more questions about what kind of man Victor Bellini actually was beneath the tailored suits and casual violence. I need time to think about this, Evelyn said finally. You have until tomorrow night. Come to Giano's at 8 o'clock. It's a restaurant I own in Manhattan. Victor pulled a card from his jacket, holding it out to her. If you show up, I'll take that as your answer. If you don't, we'll never speak of this conversation again. Evelyn took the card, her fingers brushing his for just a moment. His hands were warm, steady, the hands of a man who'd never trembled over a decision in his life. One more thing, Victor said as she turned to leave. That friend of yours, Jessica. She's been feeding information about Noah to the Costello family for 3 months. They're rivals of ours, in case you weren't aware. Noah's too blinded by chemistry to see he's being played. Evelyn stopped. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand that the betrayal you witnessed upstairs goes deeper than sex. She was never your friend, Evelyn. She's a plant, an opportunist using both you and my idiot son for her own agenda. Victor's voice hardened. If you walk away now, fine. But know that the people who hurt you are worse than you imagine, and they'll never face consequences unless someone makes them. The words settled over Evelyn like a mantle, heavy and dark. She left without responding, walking through the mansion's halls that suddenly felt less like a home and more like a fortress. The front door closed behind her with a finality that seemed to echo through her entire body. She sat in her car for 20 minutes, her hands shaking too badly to turn the key. The card Victor had given her sat on the passenger seat like a live grenade. Giano's. Tomorrow at 8. A simple dinner that would change the trajectory of her entire life. Evelyn pulled out her phone, scrolling to Noah's name. 17 missed calls. 32 text messages. Each one some variation of, let me explain, or it's not what you think, or please call me back. She blocked his number without reading them all. Then she drove home to her 5th floor walk-up, climbed the stairs that always smelled like someone's curry dinner, and locked herself in her tiny apartment that suddenly felt suffocating. She stood in the shower until the water ran cold, scrubbing her skin like she could wash away the memory of what she'd seen. That night, Evelyn didn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table with her laptop, researching Victor Bellini with the thoroughness she usually reserved for case files at work. What she found painted a picture of a man who'd inherited his father's criminal empire at 23 and had expanded it into something that touched everything from construction to shipping to waste management, all the legitimate businesses that provided cover for the ones that weren't. But there were other details too. Donations to children's hospitals, always anonymous but traceable if you knew where to look. A scholarship fund for underprivileged kids interested in business. And, this made her pause, a substantial grant to Hope Harbor 3 years ago, given through a shell company that she now realized connected back to Bellini interests. Victor Bellini had been funding her nonprofit. He'd been supporting her work before he'd ever met her. The revelation should have felt manipulative, like another chess move in whatever game he was playing. Instead, it felt like confirmation of something she'd sensed during their conversation, that Victor Bellini was far more complicated than the monster Noah's behavior had implied. Morning came without sleep. Evelyn called in sick to work, the first time she'd done that in 3 years, and spent the day in a fog of indecision. She made lists. Pros and cons. Rational arguments for why this was insane. Equally rational arguments for why walking away meant letting Noah and Jessica win. By 7 o'clock that evening, she still hadn't decided. By 7:30, she was in the shower washing her hair for the second time that day. By 7:45, she was standing in front of her closet, staring at clothes that all seemed wrong for dinner with a Mafia kingpin who'd proposed a marriage of vengeance. At 8:15, Evelyn walked into Giano's wearing a simple black dress and heels that made her ankles wobble. The restaurant was elegant in that understated way that screamed wealth. No prices on the menu, no visible staff unless you needed them. Lighting designed to make everyone look like they belonged in a European film. Victor sat at a corner table, perfectly positioned to see the entire room while keeping his back to the wall. He stood when he saw her, and Evelyn felt the weight of every decision she'd ever made leading to this moment. "You came," he said, and she couldn't tell if he'd actually doubted she would. "I came," she agreed, letting him pull out her chair. A waiter appeared with wine before she'd even settled. Victor must have ordered ahead, must have known she'd show up despite her uncertainty. The realization should have annoyed her. Instead, it felt almost reassuring, like he'd seen something in her that she was only beginning to recognize in herself. "Have you eaten?" Victor asked, the question absurdly domestic given what they were actually here to discuss. "Not since yesterday." Evelyn realized it was true. Food had seemed impossible, her stomach a knot of anxiety and anger. Victor signaled the waiter, ordered in rapid Italian that made her aware of how much she didn't know about him, how much she'd be entering blindly if she said yes. When the waiter left, Victor folded his hands on the table, his full attention on her in a way that made her feel simultaneously exposed and seen. "I assume you have questions," he said. 1,000. Evelyn took a sip of wine to steady herself. "But let's start with the most important one. Why me? You could marry anyone. Someone from your world. Someone who understands the rules. Someone who wouldn't need to be brought up to speed on how this all works. Because someone from my world would have expectations I'm not interested in meeting. They'd want power for themselves, would see marriage to me as a stepping stone to their own ambitions. Victor's expression remained neutral, but his voice held an edge of something that might have been weariness. You want revenge? Yes. But beyond that, you want to continue your work, help people, make a difference in ways that have nothing to do with my business. That makes you safe. Predictable. I'm not sure whether to be offended by that. Don't be. Predictability is valuable in my world. Most people are chaos dressed up as ambition. He paused as their first course arrived, something with scallops that looked like edible art. I need someone I can trust not to try to kill me in my sleep or sell information to my enemies. Someone who has clear boundaries and won't try to expand them at my expense. And you think that's me? Based on a background check and 5 minutes of conversation? Based on watching you walk away from humiliation with grace, based on 3 years of quarterly reports from Hope Harbor showing exactly where every dollar goes, including my money, based on the fact that you're here, terrified but sitting up straight, asking hard questions instead of just accepting what I'm offering. Victor's eyes held hers. You have integrity, Evelyn. That's rarer than you might think. The compliment landed strangely, warming something in her chest, even as her mind screamed that she shouldn't trust anything this man said. What happens to Noah? He learns that consequences exist. Beyond that, it's not my concern. Victor cut into his scallop with surgical precision. He'll continue to work in the family business. I won't cut him off completely. But his position will change. His standing in our world will shift. People will know that he disrespected someone under my protection and that I took action. By marrying the woman he cheated on. By honoring someone he treated as disposable. Victor's correction was subtle but significant. In my world, how you treat those weaker than you matters. Noah forgot that. Or perhaps he never learned it in the first place. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The food was extraordinary, each bite a reminder of the life Victor was offering. A life where scallops cost more than her weekly grocery budget, where wine came from vineyards she couldn't pronounce, where every detail was curated and controlled. I need guarantees, Evelyn said finally. Legal guarantees about my safety, my autonomy, my ability to walk away if this becomes unbearable. We'll have a prenuptial agreement drawn up. I'll have my lawyers include clauses protecting your interests, financial settlement if we divorce, assurances about your physical safety, terms around the marriage itself. Victor seemed unsurprised by her demand. Anything else? My work. I need to keep working at Hope Harbor. I can't just become some trophy wife who shops and lunches. Agreed. In fact, I'd prefer it. The best covers are built on truth, and your genuine dedication to that work makes our arrangement more believable. Evelyn set down her fork, her appetite deserting her despite the incredible food. I can't believe I'm actually considering this. Neither can I, if I'm being honest. Victor's admission caught her off guard. I expected you to walk away, to decide that revenge wasn't worth the cost. The fact that you're still sitting here says something about either your courage or your capacity for calculated risk. I'm interested to see which one it is. Maybe both, Evelyn said quietly. Maybe I'm tired of being the person who gets hurt, while everyone else moves on without consequences. Maybe I want to see what happens when I stop playing safe. Then you have your answer. Victor reached into his jacket, producing a small velvet box that made Evelyn's heart stutter. He opened it to reveal a ring that probably cost more than her car. A square-cut diamond surrounded by smaller stones set in platinum that caught the candlelight like trapped starlight. This was my grandmother's, Victor said, and something in his voice shifted, became almost gentle. She was a woman who survived things that would have broken most people. She married my grandfather during a war between families, became the bridge that ended decades of bloodshed. She understood that sometimes marriage is strategy, not romance. I think she'd appreciate what we're doing. Evelyn stared at the ring, at this family heirloom being offered as a prop in an elaborate revenge plot. If I say yes, when would we actually get married? 3 weeks? Long enough to plan something small but public, short enough that the shock value remains high. Victor held the box steady, not pushing it toward her but not pulling it away either. I've already spoken to a judge who owes me a favor. We can do the ceremony at my estate if you prefer privacy, or at the city courthouse if you want more witnesses. I don't have family to invite. My parents are dead, and I'm an only child. Then it will be intimate. My daughter, Elena, will attend. She's 16 and lives primarily with her mother in California, but she'll be here for the wedding, and we'll need a few witnesses to make it legal. Beyond that, it can be as minimal as you want. The casual mention of a daughter jolted Evelyn. Of course, Victor had a child. He'd been married before, had a whole life that she knew nothing about. She was agreeing to become this girl's stepmother, to insert herself into family dynamics she couldn't begin to understand. What does Elena know about why we're getting married? Nothing yet. I'll tell her it's complicated, which she'll accept because she's familiar with complicated. Victor's expression softened almost imperceptibly when he mentioned his daughter. She's a smart girl, perceptive. She'll figure out eventually that this isn't a conventional marriage, but she'll also see how you treat her, and that will matter more than the circumstances. Evelyn closed her eyes, trying to imagine her life 3 weeks from now, living in the Bellini mansion, wearing this ring, being introduced as Mrs. Victor Bellini at functions where everyone would whisper about the age gap, the scandal, the sheer audacity of it all. And Noah's face when he found out, the devastation, the humiliation, the karmic justice of it all. She opened her eyes and held out her left hand. Victor slipped the ring onto her finger without ceremony, without the romantic flourish that men usually employed during proposals. It fit perfectly, which made her wonder if he'd somehow known her ring size, or if his grandmother had simply had small hands like hers. "So we're doing this," Evelyn said, staring at the ring that seemed to glow with its own light. "We're doing this," Victor confirmed. He lifted his wine glass in a toast. To revenge, partnership, and the beginning of a very interesting arrangement. Evelyn clinked her glass against his, sealing a deal that would change everything she thought she knew about herself, about justice, and about how far she was willing to go when someone pushed her too far. 3 weeks later, she would stand in the Bellini estate's garden and promise to love, honor, and cherish a man she barely knew. And when Noah arrived late to the ceremony, uninvited but unable to stay away, and saw her in white standing beside his father, his face would drain of all color. He would understand in that moment exactly what his betrayal had cost him, but that was still 3 weeks away. For now, Evelyn sat in an elegant restaurant with a dangerous man, wearing a dead woman's ring, and felt something like power settling into her bones for the very first time. She thought about calling Jessica, about telling her former friend exactly what she'd done. But revenge was best served cold, and the announcement would be public enough without a preview. Let them find out the way everyone else would, through whispers and shock and the terrible realization that the quiet girl they'd discarded had teeth, after all. Evelyn raised her glass again, this time on her own. "To second chances," she said. Victor's smile was sharp as a knife's edge. "To making people regret underestimating you." They drank to that, to revenge dressed as matrimony, to strategic alliances born from betrayal, to the moment when Evelyn Carter stopped being someone things happened to and became someone who made things happen instead. The future stretched ahead, uncertain and dangerous, and nothing like what she'd planned. But for the first time since walking into that bedroom and seeing her life in ruins, Evelyn felt something other than pain. She felt dangerous. And in Victor Bellini's world, dangerous was the only way to survive. The ring felt heavier than it should have. 3 carats of perfectly cut diamond shouldn't weigh down a hand the way guilt did. Yet Evelyn couldn't stop twisting it around her finger as she sat in her apartment the morning after dinner with Victor. The early light made it throw rainbows across her kitchen wall, tiny fractured pieces of color that seemed to mock the gravity of what she'd agreed to. Her phone buzzed for the 40th time that morning. Noah. Still calling from different numbers now that she'd blocked his personal line. She'd stopped answering 2 days ago, let his desperation fill her voicemail with increasingly frantic messages that ranged from apologies to accusations to barely veiled threats about not knowing what she was getting herself into. If only he knew. The knock on her door came at exactly 9 o'clock. Evelyn checked the peephole and saw 2 men in dark suits who looked like they ironed their faces along with their shirts. Victor's people. He'd warned her they'd be coming, that certain arrangements needed to be made quickly. "Miss Carter?" The taller one spoke with the clipped efficiency of someone who'd delivered this speech before. "Mr. Bellini sent us to assist with your transition. We have movers ready to pack your apartment whenever you're ready, and there are security protocols we need to discuss." Evelyn opened the door wider, letting them into her small space that suddenly felt even more cramped with their presence. They moved through her apartment like they were cataloging evidence, noting her secondhand furniture and the water stain on her ceiling that her landlord kept promising to fix. "I haven't given notice to my landlord yet," Evelyn said, watching them examine her bookshelves with professional detachment. "Already handled. Mr. Bellini purchased the building this morning. Your lease has been terminated with appropriate compensation to you and the other tenants being relocated." The man said this like he was discussing the weather. "You're free to take whatever you want with you. The rest will be disposed of or donated according to your preferences." The casual display of power made Evelyn's stomach twist. Victor had bought her entire building in less than 12 hours, probably made a few phone calls, signed some papers, and erased the problem of her lease like it had never existed. This was the world she was entering, a world where money and influence could reshape reality with terrifying ease. "I want my books, my clothes, my grandmother's china." Evelyn heard her voice coming from somewhere far away. "Everything else can go to charity." The men made notes on identical tablets, their movements synchronized in a way that suggested military training or something close to it. The shorter one stepped closer, his expression almost sympathetic. "Miss Carter, we need to discuss security. The moment your engagement to Mr. Bellini becomes public knowledge, you become a target. There are people who would use you to hurt him, and we need to make sure you understand the risks." Victor mentioned that. "With respect, I don't think you fully grasp what it means." The man pulled out his tablet, swiping to a series of photos that made Evelyn's breath catch. Crime scenes, bodies, wreckage from bombings and shootings that looked like they belonged in war zones, not American cities. "These are from the last 3 years, attacks on Bellini interests and allies. We've prevented dozens more, but the threat is constant." Evelyn forced herself to look at each image, to really see what she was signing up for. A restaurant blown apart, tables still set for dinner among the rubble. A car burned down to its skeleton, the interior charred beyond recognition. A woman's photo, before and after, showing a beautiful socialite, and then the same woman with half her face scarred from acid. "That's Maria Costello," the man said quietly. "She married into a rival family 5 years ago. Someone wanted to send her husband a message. The implicit warning was clear. This could be Evelyn. This could be her face, her body, her life ended or destroyed because she'd agreed to wear Victor Bellini's ring." "Why are you showing me this?" Evelyn asked, though she already knew the answer. "Because Mr. Bellini insisted. He said you needed to make this choice with full information, not romantic illusions." The man's expression softened slightly. "He also said that if you want to walk away now, there won't be any consequences. He'll handle the fallout with his son personally." Evelyn looked down at the ring again, at the way it caught the light like captured fire. She thought about Noah's face in that bedroom, about Jessica's satisfied smirk, about a lifetime of being the person who played it safe while others took what they wanted without remorse. "I'm not walking away," she said firmly, "but I need to know how to protect myself. Teach me." The men exchanged a glance that might have been approval. For the next 2 hours, they walked her through security protocols that felt like something from a spy movie. How to check her car for tampering, which routes to vary when driving, how to recognize when she was being followed. They gave her a phone, encrypted, untraceable, with Victor's number programmed as the only contact. "You have an emergency. You call that number. Day or night, it doesn't matter. Someone will answer, and help will come." The taller man demonstrated the phone's panic button, hidden behind what looked like a standard camera app. 3 seconds of pressure, and every Bellini security asset in the city gets your location. It felt surreal, like she was being inducted into something far larger than a marriage of convenience. These men were preparing her for war, not a wedding. By noon, professional movers had arrived and were efficiently packing her life into boxes with the kind of speed that suggested they'd done this before, probably for witnesses being relocated, or mistresses being set up in new apartments, or any number of scenarios that existed in Victor's world. Evelyn watched them work, feeling disconnected from the process, like she was observing someone else's life being dismantled. Her phone, her real phone, rang. A number she didn't recognize, but the area code was local. Against her better judgment, she answered. "You stupid, stupid girl." Jessica's voice was pure venom, none of the false sweetness she'd always used before. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I'd say I know exactly what I've done." Evelyn kept her voice level, aware that Victor's men were listening even as they pretended not to. The question is, do you? Noah told me about his father's little proposal, about you actually being pathetic enough to consider it. Jessica's laugh was brittle, sharp enough to cut. You think marrying that monster makes you powerful? You think it makes you anything other than a whore who sold herself for revenge? The word should have stung. Instead, Evelyn felt nothing but a cold, settling calm. Is that what you told yourself when you were feeding information about Noah to the Costello family? That you were something other than a spy in his bed? The silence on the other end was gratifying. When Jessica spoke again, her voice had lost its certainty. I don't know what lies Victor's been telling you. He told me you've been compromised for 3 months, that you were planted to get close to Noah, to gather intelligence about Bellini operations. Evelyn walked to her window, looking down at the street where one of Victor's black SUVs was already parked. How much are they paying you, Jessica? Is it worth it, selling out someone you claim to care about? You have no idea what you're talking about. Noah and I are together now. We're in love. But the words rang hollow, rehearsed. You're a liability he's too stupid to see yet. Give it time. Men like Noah don't actually end up with women like you. They use them and throw them away when they become inconvenient. Evelyn surprised herself with the cruelty in her own voice. At least I went into my arrangement with my eyes open. You actually convinced yourself the lie was real. You'll regret this. Jessica's threat lacked conviction. When you're trapped in that house with a man who kills people before breakfast, when you realize you sold your soul for nothing, I'll think of you, Evelyn interrupted. I'll think about how you're probably still trying to convince Noah to leave his family business, or run away with you, or whatever fantasy you've spun. And I'll remember that at least I chose my prison. You just walked into yours thinking it was freedom. She hung up before Jessica could respond, her hand shaking with an adrenaline she hadn't known she was capable of. One of Victor's men looked at her with something that might have been respect. That felt good, didn't it? He asked. Terrifying, Evelyn admitted. But yes, good. By evening, her apartment was empty except for cleaning supplies and the echo of 3 years' worth of life. Evelyn stood in the middle of the bare living room, saying goodbye to the version of herself who'd lived here, the woman who'd believed in simple answers and straightforward love, who'd thought being good was enough to protect you from being hurt. The drive to the Bellini estate took 40 minutes through traffic that parted around their convoy like water around stone. 3 vehicles, 2 SUVs bracketing a town car where Evelyn sat in leather seats that probably cost more than her monthly rent used to. The men didn't speak to her during the drive, their attention focused on their surroundings with an intensity that reminded her exactly how seriously they took potential threats. The gates to the estate swung open as they approached, iron and stone that looked designed to repel an army. The mansion appeared through the trees like something from another era, all that old money grandeur that Evelyn had only glimpsed as Noah's guest. Now she was arriving as something else entirely, as the future Mrs. Bellini, as the woman who would sit at the head of this table and command the respect that came with the name. Victor waited on the front steps, hands in his pockets, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. He'd traded his 3-piece suit for dark slacks and a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms that suggested he did more than just sign papers and make phone calls. There was a physicality to him that Evelyn hadn't noticed before, a dangerous edge beneath the civilized veneer. "Welcome home," he said as she stepped out of the car, and the word home landed strangely, both foreign and somehow inevitable. "Strange definition of home," Evelyn replied, looking up at the mansion that loomed against the darkening sky. "You'll get used to it. Most people do." Victor gestured for her to follow him inside. "Your rooms are ready in the East Wing. I had them redecorated based on your apartment's color scheme. I hope that wasn't presumptuous." "You've bought my building, had my life packed into boxes, and arranged a wedding in 3 weeks. I think we're past worrying about presumption." But Evelyn softened the words with something that might have been a smile. "Thank you. That was thoughtful." He led her through halls she vaguely remembered from previous visits, but everything looked different now. Before, she'd been a guest moving through someone else's space. Now she was seeing it as someone who belonged here, who had the right to touch the priceless art and sit on the antique furniture without asking permission first. The East Wing was a revelation. Victor had given her an entire suite: bedroom, sitting room, private bathroom, and a study that looked out over the estate's gardens. The The colors were soft blues and grays, echoing the modest palette she'd chosen for her apartment, but elevated to something far more elegant. Fresh flowers sat on every surface, and her books, already unpacked, filled the shelves with familiar spines that made the space feel less foreign. If anything isn't to your liking, tell Mrs. Chen. She manages the household staff. Victor stood in the doorway, giving her space to explore. Your things should arrive within the hour. I took the liberty of having some additional items delivered as well. Clothes suitable for the events you'll be attending, jewelry, necessities. Consider it part of the arrangement. Evelyn ran her hand along the desk in the study, real wood polished to a mirror shine. You've thought of everything. I try to. Victor checked his watch, a gesture that seemed more habit than necessity. We have dinner with my lawyer in an hour. He'll go over the prenuptial agreement with you. I know you wanted legal guarantees. He's prepared a contract that should address your concerns. The reminder of the business aspect of all this grounded Evelyn back in reality. This wasn't a fairy tale. This was a transaction, carefully negotiated and legally binding. What if I don't like the terms? Then we revise them until you do. This only works if we both feel protected. Victor's expression was unreadable. I'm not interested in trapping you, Evelyn. Willing participation is essential. And if I decide tomorrow that I've made a mistake, that I want out before the wedding, then you walk away. No consequences, no retaliation. You'd keep the ring as compensation for your time, and I'd ensure your transition back to regular life was smooth. He said it without hesitation, like he'd already considered this possibility. But I don't think you will. No? Evelyn turned to face him fully. What makes you so sure? Because you're not the kind of person who makes decisions lightly. You've spent the last 3 days researching me, my business, my history. You've weighed the risks against the benefits. You're here because you've decided this is worth it. Victor stepped into the room, closing some of the distance between them. Am I wrong? Evelyn wanted to argue, to push back against his certainty, but he wasn't wrong. She had spent 3 sleepless nights reading everything she could find about Victor Bellini, about his empire built on shadows and legitimate business fronts, about his reputation as someone who honored deals and destroyed those who broke them. She'd made her choice with full knowledge of what it meant. You're not wrong, she admitted, but that doesn't mean I'm not terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. It's the people who aren't afraid in my world who end up dead. Victor glanced at his watch again. Get settled. I'll have someone bring you to my study in 45 minutes. Wear something comfortable. Vincent tends to drone on about legal minutia, and you'll want to be relaxed. He left before she could respond, pulling the door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a slam. Evelyn stood in her new rooms, her new life, and tried to process the surreal reality of where she was and what she'd agreed to. Her suitcases arrived 20 minutes later, carried by silent staff who unpacked with efficient precision. They hung her modest wardrobe next to clothes still bearing designer tags, outfits that Victor had selected without ever asking her size, but which she knew instinctively would fit perfectly. He'd had her investigated so thoroughly that he probably knew her measurements better than she did. Evelyn changed into a simple dress, one of her own, not the designer pieces, and studied herself in the floor-length mirror. She looked the same. Dark hair still fell in the same waves. Green eyes still held the same uncertainty. But something had shifted behind them, something harder and more determined than the woman who'd walked into Noah's bedroom 4 days ago. The knock came exactly 45 minutes later. A young woman, early 20s, wearing staff blacks, waited in the hallway with a professional smile. Mrs. Chen asked me to bring you to Mr. Bellini's study, Miss Carter. The title felt wrong and right simultaneously. Soon it would be Mrs. Bellini, a name that carried weight and fear in equal measure. Evelyn followed the young woman through the mansion's corridors, memorizing turns and landmarks in case she needed to navigate alone. The study was on the second floor, behind double doors of dark wood carved with intricate patterns that probably told a story she'd never learn. Victor stood by the windows, speaking in low tones to a man who could only be his lawyer. Vincent Caruso looked exactly like someone who managed the legal affairs of a crime family should. Silver-haired, expensive suit, eyes that had seen enough to never be shocked by anything. He turned when Evelyn entered, his expression warming with practiced charm. Miss Carter, I've heard a great deal about you. Vincent extended his hand, his grip firm but not aggressive. Shall we discuss the terms of your protection? They sat at a conference table that could have seated 12, Vincent spreading documents across the polished surface with the reverence of someone handling sacred texts. The prenuptial agreement was 37 pages of dense legal language that would have been intimidating if Vincent hadn't walked her through each section with patient clarity. In the event of divorce initiated by either party within the first 5 years, you receive a lump sum of $10 million and full ownership of any property designated as your primary residence. Vincent pointed to the relevant clause. After 5 years, the settlement increases proportionally, with a cap of $50 million at the 15-year mark. Evelyn's head spun. $10 million. $50 million. Numbers that belonged to lottery winners and corporate buyouts, not social workers who counted pennies at the grocery store. That seems excessive, she heard herself say. Victor leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. It's proportional to what you're risking by taking my name. Your safety, your reputation, potentially your life. Money is the least I can offer in exchange. There are also provisions for your continued employment and independence, Vincent continued. Mr. Bellini cannot restrict your work, your movements, or your personal relationships, provided they don't compromise family security. You maintain separate banking accounts, assets acquired during the marriage are split equitably, and you have the right to retain separate legal counsel at any time. What about children? Evelyn asked, then felt her face heat. Not that hypothetically, any children born during the marriage are presumed to be Mr. Bellini's, with full legal rights and protections as Bellini heirs. Vincent didn't even blink. In the event of divorce, custody would be negotiated separately, with the child's best interest paramount. In the event of Mr. Bellini's death, you would serve as guardian unless circumstances made that inadvisable. The clinical discussion of hypothetical children born into a marriage designed to punish Victor's son made Evelyn's stomach turn, but she forced herself to listen, to understand exactly what she was signing. The agreement also includes a mutual non-disclosure clause, Vincent said, his tone sharpening slightly. You cannot discuss Mr. Bellini's business affairs, family matters, or personal life with anyone outside approved legal and medical counsel. Violation of this clause results in immediate termination of all financial agreements and potential legal action. You mean I'd be sued if I talked to the wrong person? Evelyn looked at Victor. Or worse? Sued, yes. Worse, no. Victor's expression was granite. I don't hurt women, Evelyn. But I do protect my interests through legal means. The NDA is standard for anyone in my inner circle. It's not personal. Everything about this is personal, Evelyn countered. We're getting married to destroy your son's peace of mind. It doesn't get more personal than that. Vincent coughed delicately. Perhaps I should give you two a moment to discuss the emotional aspects while I prepare the signature pages. He retreated to the far end of the study, suddenly very interested in organizing his briefcase. Victor stood, moving to the window where twilight painted the gardens in shades of purple and gold. Evelyn joined him, maintaining careful distance. Having second thoughts? Victor asked without looking at her. Constant second thoughts. Third and fourth thoughts too. Evelyn crossed her arms. But I'm still here. Why? The question was genuine, curious. You could have this money, this security, without the marriage. I could set you up with a trust fund tomorrow, make your student loans disappear, fund your nonprofit until you retire. You don't need to marry me to escape your old life. No, but I need to marry you to make Noah understand what he lost. Evelyn surprised herself with her honesty. That makes me petty and vindictive, and I'm not sure I like this version of myself, but I'm tired of being the person who gets hurt and just accepts it as the cost of being good. Victor turned to face her, and in the fading light his features looked almost sad. You think marrying me makes you bad? I think it makes me something I don't have a word for yet. Ruthless, maybe. Calculated. Evelyn met his eyes. I think it makes me someone who's willing to use people the way they used me. And I'm not sure if that's growth or just becoming what I hate. It's survival. Victor's voice was quiet, almost gentle. You're learning that the world isn't fair, that being good doesn't protect you from being hurt, and that sometimes the only way to stop being a victim is to become something else entirely. That's not evil, Evelyn. That's evolution. Is that what you tell yourself, that everything you've done is just evolution? I tell myself that I protect what's mine, that I honor my agreements, and that I've built something that provides for hundreds of families who depend on Bellini businesses for their livelihoods. Victor's jaw tightened. I'm not a good man by conventional standards, but I'm not the monster people imagine either. I'm complicated, just like this situation, just like you're becoming. The observation settled between them like a living thing. Evelyn was becoming complicated. She could feel it happening, feel herself changing in ways that thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. The old Evelyn would have run from this. The new one wanted to see where it led. I'll sign the agreement, she said finally, but I want one addition. A clause that guarantees my work at Hope Harbor continues to receive funding regardless of what happens between us. If we divorce, if I die, if this all falls apart, that organization keeps operating. Victor's expression shifted, something like respect crossing his features. Done. Vincent will add it before you sign. They returned to the table where Vincent had prepared signature pages with the efficiency of someone who'd done this many times before. Evelyn read each page carefully before signing, her hand steady despite the magnitude of what she was doing. With each signature, she felt the door to her old life closing a little more firmly. When it was done, Vincent gathered the documents with a satisfied nod. Congratulations, you're now legally protected in ways most people never achieve. He shook both their hands. The wedding itself is scheduled for Saturday, 3 weeks from yesterday. I've taken the liberty of arranging the license and filing the necessary paperwork. All you need to do is show up. That's simple? Evelyn asked. Marriage is always simple. It's everything that comes after that gets complicated. Vincent's smile was knowing. I'll see myself out. Mr. Bellini, Miss Carter, good luck to you both. After he left, silence filled the study like water rising. Victor poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter, handing one to Evelyn without asking if she wanted it. She took it, grateful for something to do with her hands. To complicated futures, Victor said, raising his glass. Evelyn clinked hers against his. To knowing exactly what we're getting into. They drank, and the whiskey burned down her throat like liquid courage. Outside, full darkness had fallen, and somewhere in the mansion, staff moved through their evening routines, unaware that their world was about to shift with the addition of a new Mrs. Bellini. I should warn you, Victor said, setting down his empty glass. No one knows about the engagement. I told him this afternoon. Evelyn's heart stuttered. How did he take it? About as well as you'd expect. Rage, accusations, threats to disown me as his father. Victor's expression remained neutral, but something flickered behind his eyes. He'll try to contact you, probably already has. I need you to not engage with him, not until after the wedding. After that, how you handle him is your choice. What if he tries to stop the wedding? He won't. He knows better than to make that kind of scene. Victor moved to his desk, pulling out a folder. But just in case, security has been notified. The estate is locked down until after the ceremony. No one gets in without my explicit approval. The casual mention of lockdown procedures, of potential violence at a wedding, reminded Evelyn again of exactly what world she'd entered. This wasn't normal. This was a fortress mentality, a constant state of vigilance against threats both known and imagined. I'm going to bed, Evelyn said suddenly, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. This has been the longest day of my life, and tomorrow I apparently start wedding planning with a criminal empire's resources at my disposal. Elena arrives tomorrow afternoon, Victor said, making Evelyn pause in the doorway. My daughter. She's been briefed on the situation, understands this is unconventional, but she'll have questions. I wanted you to be prepared. Prepared for your teenager to interrogate me about why I'm marrying her father 3 weeks after my ex-boyfriend cheated on me with my best friend? Evelyn's laugh was slightly hysterical. I don't think there's any preparing for that conversation. Elena's perceptive, but she's also kind. Give her honesty, within reason, and she'll respect you for it. Victor's voice softened in that way it did when he mentioned his daughter. She deserves to know she's getting a stepmother who isn't pretending to be something she's not. Evelyn nodded, too tired to unpack the implications of building a real relationship with a stepdaughter in a fake marriage. She made her way back to her suite, the hallways feeling less foreign now, more like a maze she was beginning to learn. Her rooms waited exactly as she'd left them, except now the evening staff had turned down her bed and left a small plate of fruit and cheese on the nightstand. She should have been hungry. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten a real meal, but food held no appeal, so she stood in the shower instead, letting scalding water turn her skin pink while she tried to process everything that had happened in the span of less than a week. Saturday morning, she'd been Evelyn Carter, social worker, Noah Bellini's girlfriend, a woman with a simple life and simple dreams. Now she was Evelyn Carter, Mafia bride-to-be, living in a mansion under armed guard, preparing to marry one of the most dangerous men in the city for revenge so profound it would shatter what remained of her ex-boyfriend's world. The transformation should have felt wrong. Instead, standing under the spray with Victor's ring catching the light, Evelyn felt something close to rightness settling into her bones. Like she'd been playing a role her whole life and was only now discovering who she actually was beneath the performance of goodness. She slept in silk sheets that cost more than her old bed, in a room bigger than her entire apartment had been, and dreamed of nothing at all. When she woke, sunlight streamed through windows she'd forgotten to curtain, and somewhere in the house, staff were already moving through their morning routines with the quiet efficiency of people who knew their roles perfectly. Evelyn Carter's old life was officially over. In 3 weeks, she would become Mrs. Victor Bellini. And then the real performance would begin, convincing the world that this marriage was real while navigating the dangerous waters of a family built on violence, loyalty, and the kind of power that most people only glimpsed in movies. She rose, dressed, and prepared to meet her soon-to-be stepdaughter, wondering if 16-year-old Elena Bellini had any idea that her future stepmother was just as terrified and out of her depth as she probably was. The game had begun, and Evelyn was learning with each passing hour that she had a talent for playing it. Elena Bellini arrived at 2 in the afternoon, announced by the sound of tires on gravel and voices carrying through the open windows of Evelyn's study. She'd been attempting to work, reviewing case files from Hope Harbor that her supervisor had emailed with pointed questions about when she'd be returning to the office, but the words kept blurring together, her mind unable to focus on trafficking victims and resource allocation when her own life had become something she barely recognized. Evelyn moved to the window and watched a sleek black car pull up to the main entrance. The driver emerged first, opening the rear door with practiced efficiency. What stepped out was not the sullen teenager Evelyn had been bracing herself for, but a girl who moved with the unconscious grace of someone raised among wealth and danger in equal measure. Elena was tall for 16, with her father's dark hair falling in waves past her shoulders, and eyes that assessed her surroundings with the same sharp intelligence Victor possessed. She wore designer jeans and a leather jacket that probably cost more than Evelyn's monthly salary used to be, but there was nothing spoiled in her bearing, just a quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly who she was and what her last name meant. Victor appeared from somewhere inside the house, and Evelyn watched the reunion through glass like a voyeur glimpsing an intimate moment. Father and daughter embraced without the awkwardness that often plagued teenagers with their parents. Elena said something that made Victor laugh, an actual laugh that transformed his face into something younger, lighter. And for a moment, Evelyn saw the man he might have been without the weight of his empire pressing down on his shoulders. Then Elena looked up at the house, her gaze sweeping the windows with systematic precision, and her eyes found Evelyn's. Even from this distance, Evelyn felt the assessment, the calculation behind those dark eyes that were so like her father's. Elena said something to Victor, nodded toward the window where Evelyn stood, and Victor's expression shifted back to something more guarded. "No time like the present," Evelyn muttered to herself, stepping away from the window and bracing for what she knew would be the most important performance of this entire arrangement. She could fool the outside world, could convince strangers that she'd fallen desperately in love with Victor Bellini. But deceiving a perceptive teenager who knew her father better than anyone else would be exponentially harder. The knock came 15 minutes later, soft but firm. Evelyn opened her door to find Elena standing in the hallway, her jacket discarded somewhere, to reveal a simple black t-shirt that somehow looked elegant on her frame. Up close, she was even more striking, all sharp cheekbones and serious eyes that belonged to someone much older. "Hi," Elena said, and her voice carried a slight rasp that suggested California sun and late nights. "I'm Elena. I figured we should talk before the awkward family dinner Dad's probably planning where we all pretend the situation is normal." Despite everything, Evelyn found herself smiling. "Evelyn, and yes, talking now is probably wise. Come in." Elena entered the suite with the casual ease of someone who'd grown up in mansions, but her eyes cataloged everything. The unpacked boxes still stacked in the corner, the modest clothes hanging beside designer pieces in the open closet, the legal documents Evelyn had left on the desk. She settled into the window seat without invitation, tucking her legs beneath her in a way that made her look suddenly younger. "So," Elena began, her directness refreshing after days of careful verbal dancing with adults, "you were dating my half-brother, caught him cheating, and now you're marrying my dad to make Noah suffer. Is that about right?" Evelyn had expected accusations, judgment, maybe tears. She hadn't expected this calm summary delivered with the tone of someone discussing a mildly interesting movie plot. "That's the basic outline, yes, though it sounds worse when you say it out loud. It sounds like something out of a telenovela. My mom loves those." Elena's expression remained neutral. "But Dad doesn't do things without reason, and he definitely doesn't get married on impulse, so there must be more to it than just revenge. Your father wants to teach Noah a lesson about consequences." Evelyn moved to sit in the chair opposite the window seat, maintaining eye contact. "And I want to stop being the kind of person who gets hurt and just accepts it as the price of being good." "That part I get. The world is brutal to people who won't fight back." Elena tilted her head, studying Evelyn with unnerving focus. "What I don't get is why Dad chose you specifically. He could have married anyone, used anyone to punish Noah. Why a social worker with student loans and a Honda that's older than I am?" The bluntness should have been offensive. Instead, Evelyn appreciated the honesty after days of careful politeness from everyone else. "He said I had integrity, that I was predictable in the right ways, that I wouldn't try to kill him in his sleep or sell family secrets to his enemies." "Low bar, say," Elena murmured. "But accurate. Dad's last girlfriend, before he decided women were more trouble than they were worth, tried to plant listening devices in his office. He caught her, obviously, and she disappeared. I don't know where, and I've learned not to ask those kinds of questions." The casual mention of a woman disappearing sent ice down Evelyn's spine. This was Elena's normal, growing up knowing her father made people vanish, that violence and retribution were just part of the family business. Does that bother you? Not knowing? Would knowing change anything? Would it bring her back or make Dad less dangerous? Elena shrugged with practiced nonchalance. "I learned a long time ago that my father is complicated. He loves me, protects me, gives me everything I could want. He's also capable of terrible things when people cross him. Both realities exist simultaneously." Evelyn recognized the defense mechanism, the compartmentalization that allowed Elena to love her father while acknowledging his darkness. It was the same thing Evelyn herself was attempting, convincing herself that marrying a criminal kingpin for revenge was somehow different from becoming complicit in everything he represented. "Are you angry about the marriage?" Evelyn asked. "About me inserting myself into your family?" Elena considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Angry? No. Confused? A little. Curious? Definitely." She leaned forward slightly. "See, I know Noah. He's charming and impulsive and treats women like accessories he gets bored with. Dad knows this too, has tried to correct it for years. So when Noah screwed up badly enough that Dad decided to marry his ex-girlfriend, I know it wasn't just about you. It was about finally drawing a line Noah couldn't ignore. Your father said you were perceptive. I've had to be. Living between two worlds, Mom's normal life in California and Dad's empire here, you learn to read situations quickly or you end up hurt." Elena's expression softened marginally. "I also know Dad wouldn't bring someone into our family who would hurt me. He might use you to hurt Noah, but he'd never risk my safety or well-being in the process. That tells me he trusts you, which is basically impossible to earn from Victor Bellini." The observation was astute enough to make Evelyn reassess everything she thought she understood about her arrangement with Victor. She'd assumed this was purely transactional, that his interest in her began and ended with revenge against his son. But if Elena was right, if Victor had factored his daughter's safety into the equation, then the marriage meant something more complex than simple retribution. "I don't want to hurt you," Evelyn said carefully. "This whole thing is strange and complicated, but hurting you was never part of the plan." "Good, because if you did, I'd make your life very difficult." Elena said it with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm 16, not stupid. I know this marriage isn't a love match, but I also know that Dad needs someone who isn't afraid of him, but also isn't trying to use him. Maybe that's you. Maybe it isn't. I guess we'll find out." Before Evelyn could respond, her encrypted phone buzzed with a message. Victor's number. "Elena's probably interrogating you. Don't let her make you cry. She has a gift for finding emotional weak points. Dinner at 7. Dress code is family casual, whatever that means. Evelyn showed Elena the message, watching the girl's face split into a genuine grin that made her look her age for the first time. He acts like I'm some kind of emotional terrorist. I just ask direct questions. In my experience, direct questions are the most dangerous kind. Evelyn found herself relaxing despite the surreal situation. What do you want to know? We have a few hours before dinner, and I'd rather answer your questions now than have them hanging over us through awkward small talk later. Elena's eyes gleamed with something like respect. Okay, real talk. Are you afraid of my father? Terrified, Evelyn admitted. But not in the way you might think. I'm not afraid he'll hurt me physically. I'm afraid of what being with him might turn me into, of how much I'm already changing and whether I'll recognize myself in 6 months. That's honest. I like that. Elena shifted her position, getting more comfortable. Do you think you could actually fall in love with him? Like real love, not just tolerating each other for the benefits? The question caught Evelyn off guard. She'd been so focused on the revenge aspect, on the practical arrangements and legal protections, that she hadn't let herself consider the emotional possibilities. I don't know. Right now, I barely know him. He's attractive, intelligent, says things that make me think in ways I'm not used to. But love? That seems like a dangerous complication neither of us wants. Love is always dangerous. That's what makes it worthwhile. Elena spoke with the certainty of someone who'd already learned hard lessons about attachment. My parents loved each other once. Really loved each other. Then Mom saw what Dad's business actually entailed, what he was willing to do to protect his empire, and she couldn't reconcile the man she loved with the monster he became to other people. They split when I was 4. Cleanly, no drama, just acknowledgement that some loves can't survive reality. That doesn't scare you, knowing love failed between them? It teaches me that love isn't enough by itself. You need compatible moralities, compatible tolerances for darkness. Mom couldn't live with Dad's choices. You're walking into this knowing exactly what those choices are. That gives you a better shot than she ever had. The wisdom coming from a 16-year-old was startling, but Evelyn supposed growing up as Victor Bellini's daughter accelerated emotional maturity whether you wanted it to or not. What about you? Are you okay? Living between two worlds, seeing your father a few times a year, knowing what he does? Elena's expression shuddered slightly. I manage. I have therapy, lots of therapy. Mom makes sure I'm psychologically evaluated every 6 months to make sure I'm not developing antisocial tendencies or whatever they call it when kids of criminals go bad. I'm good at compartmentalizing. Too good, according to my therapist, but it's how I survive. I'm sorry you've had to learn survival skills at your age. Don't be. I'm not. Elena's chin lifted with unconscious pride. I'm a Bellini. That means something. It means I'm stronger than other kids my age, smarter about how the world actually works. It means I'll never be a victim because I know how predators think. There are worse legacies than that. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion downstairs, raised voices carrying up through the vents with a clarity that suggested intentional volume. Male voices, one of which Evelyn recognized with a sinking sensation in her stomach. Noah. Here. Despite Victor's assurances that security would keep him away until after the wedding, Elena was on her feet instantly, her body language shifting from relaxed teenager to soldier's daughter in a heartbeat. That's Noah. He shouldn't be here. Dad's security protocols. He's still family, Evelyn said, though her heart hammered against her ribs. Maybe they let him in because he's Victor's son. Not how it works. Not when Dad issues a lockdown. Elena pulled out her phone, typing rapidly. Something's wrong. They moved into the hallway together, drawn toward the noise like moths to potentially fatal flames. The main staircase came into view, and below in the foyer stood a scene that looked staged for maximum dramatic impact. Noah, disheveled and furious, held at arm's length by 2 security guards while Victor stood a few feet away with the calm of someone watching a mildly interesting theater production. You can't do this! Noah's voice cracked with rage and something that might have been genuine pain. She's mine. You can't just take her because you want to punish me. Evelyn was never yours. She was a person who made her own choices, and you treated her like property to be discarded when something shinier came along. Victor's voice carried up the stairs with lethal calm. Now she's made a different choice, one that doesn't involve you. This is insane. You're marrying her out of spite. Noah struggled against the guard's hold. his expensive clothes rumpled, dark circles under his eyes that suggested he'd slept as poorly as Evelyn had. She's 26 years old. You're old enough to be her father. 22 years difference, yes. We've established the mathematics. Victor remained perfectly still, hands in his pockets, the picture of casual control. But unlike you, I don't lie to her about who I am or what I want. Our arrangement is honest. That's more than she ever got from you. Evelyn felt Elena's hand on her arm, a silent question. Should they intervene? Retreat back to the suite? She shook her head fractionally. If she was going to survive in this world, she needed to learn to handle confrontation without running, needed to prove she could stand beside Victor even when his son was falling apart in the foyer. Evelyn! Noah spotted her at the top of the stairs, his expression shifting from rage to desperate pleading. Please, tell him you're being coerced. Tell him you don't actually want this. I'm not being coerced. Evelyn's voice came out steadier than she felt, carrying down to the marble floor with clear authority. I made my choice, Noah. The same way you made yours when you decided Jessica was more interesting than our relationship. That was a mistake. I was stupid, I know that now, but this? Noah gestured wildly between Evelyn and Victor. This is revenge. This is you trying to hurt me the way I hurt you. Yes, Evelyn said simply, and the honesty of it seemed to stun Noah into momentary silence. It is revenge. It's also an opportunity, a fresh start, and a chance to be something other than the woman you cheated on. It's complicated, Noah, but it's my choice to make. He's a killer, a criminal. Noah's voice rose to a near shout. He's destroyed families, ordered people murdered. You work with trafficking victims, and you're going to marry someone who probably profits from that exact industry. The accusation hung in the air like poisoned gas. Evelyn felt Elena stiffen beside her, felt her own certainty waver for just a moment. Was it true? Did Victor's empire touch human trafficking? She'd researched his business interests, but found only legitimate fronts and rumors of drug running, weapons dealing, extortion. Not once had trafficking come up. Victor's expression didn't change, but something darkened in his eyes. I've done many things I'm not proud of. Hurt people who deserved it, and some who didn't. Built an empire on violence and fear and calculated brutality, but I've never, not once in 25 years, involved myself in human trafficking. That particular evil is where I draw my line. Ask anyone in this city. Ask your friend Jessica's employers at the Costello family. They'll tell you the same thing. You're lying to protect yourself. I don't lie to protect myself. I don't need to. Victor's voice dropped to something dangerous. You want to accuse me of crimes? Be specific. Be accurate. But don't throw around allegations about trafficking when you know nothing about my actual business, when you've spent your entire life benefiting from money I earned while pretending to be too good to know where it came from. The hit landed perfectly. Noah flinched like he'd been struck because it was true. He'd lived off his father's empire while maintaining plausible deniability about its sources. He'd worn expensive clothes and driven luxury cars and charmed women in restaurants that catered to criminals, all while pretending he was somehow separate from the violence that funded his lifestyle. Get him out of here, Victor said to the guards, his tone conversational but absolute. And find out how he got past the gate. Someone's getting fired for this breach. As the guards began forcibly escorting Noah toward the door, he twisted back toward the stairs one more time. Evelyn, please, don't do this. I love you. The words that would have shattered her a week ago now barely registered. Evelyn looked at Noah, really looked at him, and saw not the charming man she'd thought she'd loved, but a spoiled child throwing a tantrum when a toy was taken away. He didn't love her. He'd probably never loved her. She'd been convenient, safe, someone who made him feel noble for slumming it with a woman who had morals and a real job. No, you don't, Evelyn called down, and her voice was steady as stone. You love the idea of me, the good girl who made you feel less guilty about your family business. But you never loved me enough to be honest with me, to protect me, to choose me when it mattered. So whatever you're feeling now, it's not love, it's just wounded pride. Noah's face crumpled with an emotion she couldn't quite read, and then the guards had him outside, the heavy front door closing with a finality that echoed through the cavernous foyer. Silence settled over the mansion like snowfall, broken only by Elena's low whistle of appreciation. Damn, the teenager murmured. That was brutal, in the best way, but still brutal. Victor looked up at them, his expression unreadable from this distance. Evelyn, a word, please. Elena squeezed her arm once before releasing it. I'll be in my room if you need backup, though I think you just proved you can handle yourself. Evelyn descended the stairs with the sensation of walking towards something inevitable, each step bringing her closer to the man who was simultaneously her salvation and potential destruction. Victor waited at the bottom, and when she reached him, he studied her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. She didn't. "Are you okay?" he asked, and the genuine concern in his voice caught her off guard. "I should be asking you that. He's your son. He's also an idiot who's trying to manipulate you back into his life." Victor gestured toward his study. "Walk with me." They moved through the mansion in silence, past priceless art and windows that looked out on grounds that stretched for acres. The study was exactly as it had been the night before. Leather and wood, and the smell of expensive whiskey that probably cost more per bottle than most people's monthly rent. Victor poured 2 glasses without asking, handing her one before settling into the chair behind his desk. Not the casual position by the window or the intimate proximity of the sitting area. This was Victor Bellini, the businessman, the kingpin, putting professional distance between them. "What Noah said about trafficking," Evelyn began, needing to address it directly. "Is it true? Do you draw a line there?" "It's true. I have many lines, actually. I don't hurt children. I don't traffic humans. I don't tolerate rape or domestic violence within my organization." Victor said it matter-of-factly, like he was listing grocery items. "I'm a criminal, Evelyn. I won't pretend otherwise, but I'm not every kind of criminal. Some evils are beneath even me." "Why those lines specifically?" "Because I was a child once who watched his father brutalize his mother. Because I've seen what human trafficking does to people, the Hope Harbor cases you work on. I've helped recover some of those women, usually when they've been taken by rivals who engage in that particular trade." Victor took a slow sip of his whiskey. "Ideal in vices that adults choose: drugs, gambling, protection rackets for businesses that want security. People who engage with my operations do so willingly, knowing the risks. The moment someone becomes a victim rather than a participant, they're outside my business model." The explanation should have been cold comfort. He was still admitting to running a criminal empire. But Evelyn found herself believing him, found the moral framework he described more honest than Noah's willful ignorance or Jessica's calculated betrayal. "Noah will try again," Victor continued, shifting topics with the fluidity of someone used to managing multiple crises simultaneously. "He'll call, show up places you frequent, possibly try to intercept you before the wedding. I can increase your security detail, but ultimately you need to decide how you want to handle him. I want him to leave me alone, to accept that what we had is over and move on with Jessica or whoever else he's using to feel better about himself." Evelyn set down her glass, the whiskey untouched. "But I know that's not going to happen. Not until after the wedding. Maybe not even then. No, probably not. Noah's never been good with boundaries or consequences." Something that might have been regret crossed Victor's face. "That's partially my fault. His mother and I divorced when he was young, and I overcompensated with material things instead of discipline. Created a man who thinks he can charm his way out of anything. It's not too late. You could still teach him those lessons without using me as the weapon." "I could, but that wouldn't give you what you need." Victor leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers with uncomfortable precision. "You need to see him suffer the way you suffered. You need him to understand viscerally what he lost. That's not noble or pretty, but it's honest. And I respect honesty more than I respect false nobility." The acknowledgement of her darker desires felt like permission to be human, flawed, hungry for retribution in ways that social workers weren't supposed to be. Evelyn had spent her entire adult life helping others, putting aside her own needs and wants in service of people who'd been victimized. For once, just this once, she wanted to be the person who acted instead of reacted, who took instead of gave. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not trying to make me feel guilty about wanting revenge. Revenge gets a bad reputation. Sometimes it's perfectly appropriate." Victor stood, moving around the desk to lean against its front edge, closer to her now. "The key is making sure the revenge is proportional and doesn't consume you entirely. We'll hurt Noah, yes, but we won't destroy him. There's a difference." "Is there? From where I'm standing, marrying you seems pretty destructive to whatever relationship you two had left. Noah and I lost our relationship years ago, long before you entered the picture. This is just making official what's been true for a while. that he and I operate on different moral frequencies and can't exist in the same space without destruction. Victor's expression grew distant. Better to accept that now than keep pretending we're a functional family. The sadness in his voice was subtle but real, reminding Evelyn that revenge came with costs for everyone involved, not just the target. Victor was sacrificing his relationship with his son for this. Whether that was noble or foolish remained to be seen. Elena seems to think I could actually fall in love with you, Evelyn said, not sure why she was bringing this up now except that the whiskey and exhaustion had lowered her filters. She asked me directly if I thought it was possible. Victor's eyebrows rose fractionally. And what did you tell her? That I didn't know. That right now we barely know each other and love seems like a dangerous complication. Evelyn met his eyes, refusing to look away from the intensity she found there. What would you have said? That love is a luxury people in our positions can't typically afford. That respect, trust, and mutual benefit are more reliable foundations than emotions that change with circumstances. Victor paused, something shifting in his expression. But I would also say that I've been surprised before. That impossible things occasionally become possible when you're not looking for them. The air between them felt charged suddenly, heavy with implications neither of them was quite ready to name. Evelyn stood, needing distance, needing to break whatever spell was forming before it could solidify into something neither of them had bargained for. I should get ready for dinner, she said, her voice not quite steady. Evelyn, Victor's voice stopped her at the door. What you said to Noah, about him never loving you enough to choose you, that was true. But for what it's worth, anyone who couldn't see your value was too blind to deserve you anyway. The compliment landed like a physical touch, warm and unexpected. Evelyn didn't trust herself to respond, so she simply nodded and left before the moment could become anything more complicated than it already was. Dinner that night was surreal in its normalcy. Victor, Elena, and Evelyn sat at one end of the massive dining table, the other end left conspicuously empty where Noah's place presumably had been, and ate food prepared by a chef who could probably charge $1,000 a plate in any restaurant in the city. They talked about Elena's school, about Evelyn's work at Hope Harbor, about mundane things that felt absurd given the circumstances that had brought them together. But beneath the surface normalcy, Evelyn felt the shift happening. She was becoming part of this family, this strange constellation of damaged people orbiting Victor's dark star. Elena watched the interaction between her father and future stepmother with sharp eyes, cataloging every glance and careful word. Victor maintained his careful distance, but Evelyn caught him looking at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention, his expression thoughtful in ways she couldn't quite interpret. After Elena excused herself to FaceTime friends in California, Evelyn and Victor sat in companionable silence over coffee that was probably worth more than she wanted to know. The mansion settled around them, staff disappearing into whatever quarters they occupied after the family retired, security systems engaging with soft beeps and clicks that marked the fortress being sealed for the night. 2.5 weeks until the wedding, Victor said finally, breaking the quiet. Are you having second thoughts? Constant second thoughts, but I'm still here. Evelyn smiled slightly. That seems to be my refrain lately. Good. Doubt keeps you sharp. It's certainty that gets people killed in my world. Victor stood, offering his hand to help her up. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start the public phase of this arrangement. News of our engagement breaks in the morning papers, and by noon, every society columnist in the city will be trying to figure out who you are and why Victor Bellini decided to marry someone so completely outside his usual circles. The reminder of the scrutiny to come made Evelyn's stomach turn, but she took his hand anyway, letting him pull her to her feet. His palm was warm against hers, his grip firm without being aggressive, and for just a moment they stood too close, breathing the same air, existing in a pocket of possibility that felt dangerous and alluring in equal measure. Then Victor stepped back, releasing her hand with careful deliberation. Good night, Evelyn. Good night, Victor. She climbed the stairs to her suite, feeling his eyes on her back until she turned the corner and disappeared from view. In her room, she found fresh flowers on every surface and a small box on her nightstand that hadn't been there before. Inside was a phone, newer, more expensive than the encrypted one Victor had already given her, with a note in precise handwriting. For personal use. Your old number has been disconnected to prevent Noah from harassing you further. Your contacts have been transferred. The panic button is under settings. Use it if you need anything. V. The thoughtfulness of it struck her harder than it should have. Victor Bellini, criminal kingpin, had personally ensured she had a working phone with emergency protocols built in. Had thought about her safety and comfort in ways Noah never had during 18 months of dating. Evelyn fell asleep that night with the ring catching moonlight on her finger and dreams of futures she didn't dare examine too closely in daylight. Somewhere in the mansion, Victor probably sat in his study reviewing security footage and business reports. And somewhere in California, Elena was probably telling her mother about the strange woman their father was marrying for revenge. And somewhere in the city, Noah Bellini was probably drinking himself into oblivion, trying to process how completely his world had shifted in less than a week. The game was accelerating. The wedding approached with inexorable certainty. And Evelyn was discovering that the more she played her role, the less it felt like acting, and the more it felt like becoming someone new entirely. Someone dangerous. Someone powerful. Someone who wore Victor Bellini's ring and slept in his house, and was learning, hour by hour, how to survive in a world that devoured the weak and elevated those strong enough to take what they wanted. She was becoming Mrs. Bellini. And that transformation was just beginning. The news broke at 6:30 the following morning, precisely when Victor's publicist had scheduled it. Evelyn woke to her new phone buzzing with alerts from news apps she didn't remember downloading. Victor's team had clearly been thorough in their setup. The headlines scrolled past with variations on the same shocked theme. Victor Bellini to wed social worker half his age. Mafia kingpin surprise engagement. Bellini Empire welcomes unlikely new member. Her photo accompanied each article, pulled from Hope Harbor's website, where she smiled in professional attire that now seemed to belong to a different person entirely. The contrast between that wholesome image and the world she'd entered couldn't have been starker if Victor had planned it, which she realized he probably had. The optics were perfect. Dangerous criminal reformed by love of a good woman, or good woman corrupted by proximity to power, depending on which narrative sold more papers. Evelyn was still reading when her door opened without warning. Elena stood in the threshold wearing silk pajamas that probably cost more than Evelyn's entire sleepwear collection, holding a tablet that displayed a particularly salacious gossip site. "Have you seen what they're saying about you online? It's absolutely insane." "I'm getting the general idea." Evelyn set down her phone, bracing herself. "How bad is it?" "Depends on your tolerance for strangers speculating about your sex life, your motivations, and whether you're a gold digger or a mastermind." Elena flopped onto the bed with the casual intimacy of someone who'd already decided Evelyn was safe. The feminist sites can't decide if you're a victim or a strategic genius. The crime blogs are trying to figure out what you bring to Dad's operation, and the society pages are losing their minds because you're not from their world, and they don't know how to categorize you. Fantastic. Evelyn rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building behind her eyes. This is exactly what I wanted to wake up to. Dad's handling it. He's got 3 different PR firms managing the narrative, making sure the story stays focused on wealthy businessman finds love with charitable worker instead of criminal marries son's ex for revenge. Elena scrolled through her tablet, her expression amused. Though personally, I think the revenge angle is way more interesting. Before Evelyn could respond, her phone rang with Victor's number. She answered, hyper-aware of Elena listening to every word. "I take it you've seen the coverage." "Hard to miss when it's trending on 3 different platforms." Victor's voice was calm, unbothered by the media frenzy. "How are you handling it?" "I'm managing. Your daughter is currently sprawled on my bed reading the most creative speculation about my character I've ever encountered." Evelyn watched Elena grin at being mentioned. "Should I be concerned about the photographers outside the gates?" "They'll be there until the wedding, possibly after. I've instructed security to keep them at a distance, but you should expect cameras anytime you leave the estate." Victor paused, and Evelyn heard papers shuffling in the background. "We have an appointment at 11 with the wedding planner, purely for appearances. The ceremony itself will be simple, but we need to be seen making traditional preparations." "You've really thought of everything." "I've been planning strategic operations since before you were born, Evelyn. A wedding is just another form of tactical deployment." The dry humor in his tone made her smile despite the circumstances. "Wear something appropriate for photographs. They'll definitely catch us leaving." After he hung up, Evelyn turned to find Elena watching her with that too perceptive gaze that seemed to run in the Bellini family. "You're smiling. That's new. I wasn't aware I'd been walking around frowning." Not frowning, just serious, guarded. Elena sat up, tucking her legs beneath her. But just now, talking to Dad, you smiled like an actual person having an actual conversation, not someone playing a role. The observation was uncomfortably accurate. Evelyn had been so focused on maintaining her composure, on treating this arrangement as purely transactional, that she hadn't noticed the small moments of genuine connection slipping through. Your father has unexpected moments of humor. He used to laugh more. Before Mom left, before the business got so complicated, before Noah turned into such a disappointment. Elena's expression grew wistful. I remember being little and Dad would do these ridiculous voices when reading bedtime stories. Made me laugh so hard I couldn't breathe. Then something shifted and he became this serious version of himself. I miss the other guy sometimes. The glimpse of Victor as a father reading bedtime stories painted a picture so different from the man Evelyn knew that she struggled to reconcile the two images. Maybe he just needed a reason to stop being so serious all the time. Maybe you'll be that reason. Elena hopped off the bed, heading for the door. I'm going to get breakfast. Want me to have them send something up? Or are you going to brave the dining room where Dad's probably reading every article written about you while drinking espresso like it's a competitive sport? I'll brave the dining room. Hiding feels like admitting I'm ashamed of this choice. Good answer. Elena's approval was clear. Wear the blue dress. The one in your closet that still has tags on it. It photographs well and makes you look powerful instead of sweet. You're going to need powerful today. The dress was indeed blue, a shade somewhere between navy and midnight that hugged her figure before falling in elegant lines to just below her knees. Designer label, impeccable tailoring, the kind of dress that cost more than she used to make in a month. Evelyn paired it with heels that made her ankles wobble until she practiced walking in them, then studied herself in the mirror. Elena was right. The dress transformed her from social worker to someone who could stand beside Victor Bellini and look like she belonged there. The dining room hummed with quiet energy when she entered. Victor sat at the head of the table exactly as Elena had predicted, a tablet propped beside his coffee cup, his attention focused on whatever article he was reading with the intensity of a general reviewing battlefield reports. He looked up when Evelyn entered, and something flickered across his face. Approval. Appreciation. Something else she couldn't quite name. The blue dress. Good choice. He stood, pulling out the chair to his right with old-fashioned courtesy that seemed at odds with his reputation. Elena texted me that you'd chosen it. She has excellent instincts for these things. Your daughter is terrifyingly perceptive. Evelyn settled into the chair, accepting coffee from a staff member who appeared and disappeared like a ghost. She's been reading the coverage like it's entertainment. For her, it probably is. Elena's grown up watching me manipulate media narratives. This is just another strategic campaign to her. Victor set aside his tablet, giving Evelyn his full attention. The general consensus seems to be divided between those who think you're incredibly brave and those who think you're incredibly stupid. Very few people are considering that you might be both. Which camp are you in? I think you're adapting remarkably well to circumstances that would break most people. Whether that's bravery or stupidity probably depends on how this all ends. Victor's expression remained neutral, but his eyes held something warmer. The wedding planner is expecting us at 11. Between now and then, we need to discuss how we're presenting ourselves publicly. United front, I assume. Madly in love, can't keep our hands off each other, all the usual romantic cliches that sell magazines. Actually, no. Victor's answer surprised her. We're going to present ourselves as exactly what we are. Two adults who've made a calculated decision to build something together. Dignified, respectful, but not performatively romantic. The truth often works better than lies because people don't know what to do with it. Evelyn considered this approach, finding it both refreshing and terrifying. You want to tell people this is essentially a business arrangement? Not in those words, but I want them to see that we're not pretending to be something we're not. That we respect each other, enjoy each other's company, but we're not selling them a fairy tale. Victor leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxed despite the intensity of the conversation. People will speculate regardless. Let them. As long as we're consistent in how we present ourselves, the narrative stays in our control. The strategy made sense in a way Evelyn's romantic fantasies never had. No pretending to be desperately in love, no manufacturing chemistry for cameras. Just two people choosing to build something together with clear eyes and realistic expectations. It felt honest in a way that most marriages probably weren't. I can work with that, Evelyn said finally. Dignified respect I can do. It's the fake passion that would have felt wrong anyway. Who said anything about fake? Victor's question was casual, but the look he gave her was anything but. I find you attractive, Evelyn. I respect your intelligence and your courage. If those feelings deepen into something more, we'll deal with it. If they don't, we'll still have a functional partnership. Either way, there's no need to perform emotions we're not feeling. The directness of the admission made heat crawl up Evelyn's neck. In the weeks since she'd agreed to this arrangement, they'd maintained careful physical distance, treated each other with polite formality, avoided anything that might complicate the transactional nature of their agreement. Now Victor was calmly acknowledging attraction like it was a variable in an equation they might need to account for eventually. I should finish getting ready, Evelyn said, standing before the conversation could veer into territory she wasn't equipped to navigate before breakfast. 11 o'clock meeting with the wedding planner. Dignified respect on full display for photographers. Got it. Victor's slight smile suggested he knew exactly why she was retreating, but he let her go without comment. Evelyn, one more thing. Noah tried to access the estate last night around 2 a.m. Security turned him away, but he's becoming increasingly erratic. If he contacts you directly, I need to know immediately. The information settled over her like cold water. Erratic how? He showed up drunk, demanded to see you, threatened legal action when guards refused entry. My people escorted him back to his apartment and confiscated his keys to prevent him from trying to drive. Victor's expression hardened. He's spiraling. That makes him unpredictable, and unpredictable people do stupid things. You think he'd try to hurt me? I think he'd try to convince you to leave with him, probably through some grand romantic gesture that would embarrass everyone involved. But I also think he's in enough pain that he might do something genuinely reckless. Victor stood, closing the distance between them with measured steps. I'm assigning you a dedicated security detail starting today. 2 guards, rotating shifts with you anytime you're outside the estate. Oh, that seems excessive for an ex-boyfriend having a meltdown. Noah's my son, but he's also been raised in this world. He knows how to bypass security, how to access weapons, how to make things happen when he wants them badly enough. Victor's hand came up, hovering near her shoulder before dropping back to his side. A gesture of comfort aborted before it could complicate things. I won't risk your safety because I underestimated his capacity for poor judgment. The concern in his voice was real, not performative. Victor Bellini, who ordered people's deaths with the same tone he used to order dinner, was genuinely worried about her safety from his own son. The complexity of that reality made Evelyn's head spin. Okay, security detail. I'll adjust. She managed a smile that felt more confident than she felt. See you at 11. The morning passed in a blur of preparation that felt surreal in its mundanity. Staff helped her with makeup, professional but not overdone, elegant but not trying too hard. Her hair was styled in soft waves that looked effortless, but probably required significant expertise. When she finally looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The woman staring back looked poised, sophisticated, like someone who belonged on Victor Bellini's arm. The photographers were waiting when their car pulled through the estate gates at precisely 10:45. Cameras flashed like strobes, questions shouted over each other in an incomprehensible wall of noise. Victor's hand settled on the small of her back, warm through the fabric of her dress, proprietary but not possessive, as they walked to the car. The touch looked natural, practiced, like they'd been together for years instead of days. Don't look at them, Victor murmured, his mouth close to her ear so the cameras couldn't read his lips. Look at me like I'm saying something mildly amusing. Evelyn obeyed, tilting her face toward him with a small smile. This close, she could see silver threading through his dark hair at his temples, could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that probably had a name in Italian. His eyes met hers with an intensity that made the smile on her face shift from performed to genuine. Better, he said softly. Now get in the car like you do this every day. The wedding planner's office occupied the top floor of a building in Manhattan's most exclusive district, all glass walls and minimalist furniture that screamed old money and discretion. Vivienne Laurent greeted them with the professional warmth of someone who'd planned weddings for people far more dangerous than Victor Bellini and survived to tell the tale. Mr. Bellini, Miss Carter, congratulations on your engagement. Vivienne's French accent was subtle, elegant, probably cultivated to make clients feel sophisticated. I understand we're working with a compressed timeline. 3 weeks from this Saturday, Victor confirmed, settling into a chair that probably costs more than most people's cars. We want simple, elegant, private. No circus, no spectacle. Of course. Though I must warn you, with your profile, completely private will be challenging. Vivian pulled out samples, invitations, flowers, color schemes, all the traditional elements of wedding planning. May I ask your vision for the ceremony? Traditional church, outdoor garden, intimate indoor? The estate gardens, Evelyn heard herself say, surprising both Victor and herself. If we're doing this, I want it somewhere beautiful, somewhere that feels like possibility instead of transaction. Victor's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, something like approval warming his features. The gardens it is. Vivian, we'll need a tent in case of weather, seating for approximately 50 people, nothing too formal. The planning session stretched for 2 hours, discussing details that felt both important and meaningless. Flowers, white roses and deep purple calla lilies, dramatic but not cloying. Music, a string quartet, classical pieces that wouldn't clash with the gravity of what they were actually doing. Food, a reception dinner, intimate enough for conversation but formal enough to mark the occasion as significant. Through it all, Evelyn watched Victor navigate decisions with the same strategic precision he probably applied to business deals. He deferred to her on aesthetic choices, took charge on security concerns Vivian hadn't even considered, and maintained a perfectly balanced presentation of a man getting married because he wanted to, not because he had something to prove. "And the bride's dress?" Vivian asked, turning to Evelyn with genuine curiosity. "Do you have a designer in mind, or would you like recommendations?" "I want something simple, elegant but not trying too hard, not a princess dress." Evelyn thought about the woman she was becoming, the version of herself that could stand beside Victor without apology. Something that looks like it belongs on an adult making an adult decision, not a girl playing dress-up. "I know exactly what you need." Vivian made notes with the efficiency of someone who'd heard similar requests 100 times. "I'll send you options by tomorrow. We're cutting it close for alterations, but I have resources that can make magic happen on impossible timelines." As they wrapped up, Vivian's phone buzzed with an urgency that made her frown. She glanced at the screen, her professional composure slipping for just a moment. "I apologize, but there's a situation developing that you should be aware of. It seems someone has leaked your wedding date and location to the press. I'm getting calls from photographers requesting access to the estate." Victor's expression didn't change, but Evelyn felt the air around him cool by several degrees. How many people knew the specific details? "Only my core team, and they've all signed NDAs with substantial penalties for breach." Vivian's distress was genuine. "I'll investigate immediately, but I wanted you to know it wasn't your team." Victor stood, his movement fluid despite the tension Evelyn could sense building in him. "We have a leak somewhere in my organization. This is the second breach in as many days." The implication hung heavy in the elegant office. Someone in Victor's empire was feeding information to outsiders, compromising security around the wedding specifically, which meant someone wanted to disrupt the ceremony, or worse, wanted easy access to know exactly where and when Victor Bellini would be most vulnerable. "We need to go," Victor said quietly, his hand finding Evelyn's elbow with gentle insistence. "Vivian, proceed with planning, but expect the location to change. I'll notify you where and when it's safe to do so." The drive back to the estate was tense, Victor on his phone speaking in rapid Italian to people whose responses Evelyn couldn't hear. The security detail that had accompanied them, 2 SUVs bracketing their town car, drove with heightened alertness, taking routes that varied from their morning path. "Is this normal?" Evelyn asked when Victor finally ended his call. "Leaks and security breaches?" "No, which is why it's concerning." Victor's jaw was tight, his usual composure strained. "Someone's testing our defenses, trying to find weak points. Either they're planning something specific around the wedding, or they're trying to rattle us into making mistakes." "Noah?" The name came out before Evelyn could stop it. "Possibly. He has access to family information, knows security protocols from when he was still trusted with that knowledge." Victor's expression darkened. "Or it could be the Costello family, using the wedding as an opportunity to strike while we're distracted. Or any number of other enemies who see my marriage as a moment of weakness." The casual mention of enemies planning to strike made Evelyn's stomach turn. She'd agreed to marry into danger, had told herself she understood the risks. But understanding abstractly and living the reality of people actively trying to find ways to hurt you were drastically different experiences. Back at the estate, Victor disappeared into his office with a team of security personnel, while Evelyn was escorted to her suite by guards who looked like they expected an attack at any moment. Elena found her there an hour later, curled in the window seat, pretending to read case files from work that she couldn't focus on. "Dad's losing his mind trying to figure out who leaked the wedding information," Elena announced, settling beside Evelyn with the comfort of someone who'd lived through security crises before. "He's had 3 different people fired already, and he's still not satisfied. People's jobs are being destroyed because someone told the press when we're getting married?" Evelyn's guilt was immediate and sharp. "People's jobs are being destroyed because they violated protocols that exist to keep this family safe," Elena corrected firmly. "This isn't about a wedding date, Evelyn. This is about someone proving they can access confidential information and spread it without consequences. That's a security failure Dad can't ignore." The distinction made sense intellectually, but Evelyn still felt the weight of people losing their livelihoods because she'd agreed to this arrangement. Does this happen often? Security breaches and investigations? Often enough that I've learned not to get attached to specific staff members. They come and go based on Dad's trust level, which is basically impossible to maintain long term. Elena pulled her knees up, resting her chin on them. "He fired my favorite bodyguard last year because the guy accepted a phone call during a shift. Didn't matter that it was the guy's mom in the hospital. Protocol said no personal calls while on duty, and he broke protocol." That seems harsh. That's the world we live in. Rules exist because people die when they're not followed. Elena's matter-of-fact delivery of such a dark statement reminded Evelyn again how different the girl's childhood had been from most teenagers. You're going to have to get comfortable with Dad making decisions that seem cruel, but are actually just practical survival strategies. Before Evelyn could respond, shouting erupted from somewhere on the ground floor. Male voices raised in anger, the crash of something breaking. Both women were on their feet instantly, moving toward the commotion with the same magnetic pull that drew witnesses to car accidents. The foyer was a war zone. Noah stood in the center, held back by 4 security guards who looked like they were considering just knocking him unconscious and being done with it. His face was flushed with alcohol and rage, his expensive clothes rumpled like he'd slept in them. And standing in front of him, perfectly calm despite the chaos, was Victor. "You can't keep me out of my own father's house!" Noah's voice cracked with something that might have been genuine anguish beneath the fury. "I grew up here. This is my home." This ceased being your home when you compromised family security by giving estate access codes to your girlfriend who works for our enemies. Victor's voice was Arctic calm, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. "You've been tolerated because you're my son. But tolerance has limits, Noah. You've reached them. This is about Evelyn, about you stealing her from me to teach me some sick lesson." Noah lunged against the guard's hold, making them tighten their grip. "You don't even want her. You're just using her to punish me." "I want her more than you ever did." Victor's statement was simple, devastating in its directness. "I want her safe, respected, treated like she matters. You wanted her convenient and quiet and willing to ignore your flaws. There's a difference." The words hit Noah like physical blows. His expression crumpled, rage giving way to something rawer, more desperate. His eyes found Evelyn on the stairs, and the naked pain in them made her chest constrict despite everything. "Evie, please, tell him you don't want this. Tell him you're being coerced." Noah's voice dropped to something close to begging. "I know I hurt you. I know I was an idiot. But this? Marrying my father? This is insane." Evelyn descended the stairs slowly, aware of Elena beside her, of Victor's security team poised for violence, of the moment balanced on a knife's edge between tragedy and farce. She stopped a safe distance from Noah, close enough to see the broken blood vessels in his eyes from too much drinking, the tremor in his hands that suggested he was barely holding himself together. "I'm not being coerced, Noah. I'm making a choice. Maybe not the choice you'd prefer, but it's mine to make." Evelyn kept her voice level, compassionate but firm. "What you did hurt me. What you did with Jessica while I was working late trying to help people who'd been trafficked, raped, destroyed by men who saw them as objects to be used, that hurt me in ways I'm still processing. But this isn't about hurting you back. This is about choosing something different for my life." "By marrying a killer? A criminal?" Noah's laugh was broken glass. You work with victims, and you're going to share a bed with someone who creates them? I work with victims created by people like Jessica's employers, people who traffic in human misery for profit. Your father has never touched that particular evil. Evelyn felt Victor's eyes on her but didn't look away from Noah. Is he perfect? No. Is he honest about what he is? Yes, that's more than I can say for you. The truth of it seemed to deflate Noah completely. His shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him like water from a broken container. I loved you, he whispered. I really did love you. Maybe you did, in your way, but it wasn't enough. And now it's too late. Evelyn stepped back, creating final distance. You need to let me go, Noah, for both our sakes. Victor moved then, positioning himself subtly between Evelyn and his son, not aggressive, just definitively protective. You've said your piece. Now you need to leave. Security will escort you home. If you return to this estate again without explicit invitation, you'll be treated as a hostile intruder. Those are consequences you don't want to face. Noah looked between them, his father's implacable calm, Evelyn's sad certainty, and seemed to finally understand that nothing he said or did would change the trajectory of what was happening. The guards began moving him toward the door, and this time he didn't fight them. At the threshold, he turned back one last time. When this all falls apart, when you realize what he really is and what you've become by being with him, don't expect me to pick up the pieces. Then he was gone, removed from the estate with the efficiency of well-trained security removing any other threat. Silence settled over the foyer like ash after an explosion. Evelyn realized she was shaking, adrenaline flooding her system now that the confrontation was over. That was intense, Elena said quietly. But you handled it perfectly. Firm without being cruel, honest without being brutal. Dad, you raised your son to be an idiot, but you're marrying someone with actual emotional intelligence. Victor shot his daughter a look that suggested she should probably stop talking, but Elena just grinned and disappeared back upstairs, leaving Evelyn and Victor standing in the foyer, surrounded by guards who were trying very hard to pretend they hadn't just witnessed the family's dirty laundry on full display. Are you okay? Victor asked, and the genuine concern in his voice almost undid Evelyn's composure completely. I don't know. Ask me tomorrow when I'm not riding an adrenaline high from confronting my ex-boyfriend in my future husband's mansion while armed guards kept him from possibly attacking me. Evelyn's laugh was slightly hysterical. This is my life now. This is actually my life. It doesn't have to be. Victor moved closer, his voice dropping to something meant only for her. You can still walk away. This confrontation, the media circus, the security breaches, they'll only get worse. If you want out, now is the time. Evelyn looked up at him, this man who'd offered her revenge and protection and a life so different from what she'd known that it might as well be on another planet. She thought about Noah's broken expression, about Jessica's calculated betrayal, about a lifetime of being good and careful and still ending up hurt. I'm not walking away, she said firmly. I'm seeing this through. Even though it's dangerous, even though my son just made it clear he thinks you're making a terrible mistake, especially because of that. Evelyn felt certainty settling into her bones, solid and unshakable. Noah's right about one thing. I am changing. I'm becoming someone I don't fully recognize yet, but I'd rather become this version of myself with my eyes open than go back to being the person who got hurt and pretended it didn't matter. Victor studied her face for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted, respect warming into something deeper, something neither of them was quite ready to name. Then we move forward. Security will be tighter, the wedding location will change, and Noah will be kept away by any means necessary. But we move forward. Together, Evelyn said, and it felt like a promise that went beyond their business arrangement. Together, Victor agreed. 2 weeks. 14 days until Evelyn Carter became Mrs. Victor Bellini in a ceremony that would finalize the most elaborate revenge plot she'd ever been part of. 14 days until the point of no return, until her old life was officially buried and her new one began in earnest. She should have been terrified. Part of her was. But another part, the part that was learning to navigate danger with grace, that was discovering she had a talent for this world's particular chess game, felt something close to excitement thrumming through her veins. The transformation was accelerating, and Evelyn was discovering that she had no desire to slow it down. The final 2 weeks passed in a blur of controlled chaos that Evelyn navigated with increasing confidence. The wedding location changed 3 times as Victor's security team tracked down the source of the leak, eventually discovering it was a low-level accountant with gambling debts who'd sold information to a tabloid for $20,000. The man disappeared from the city so quickly that Evelyn didn't ask questions, just accepted that some problems in Victor's world were solved with efficiency that didn't bear close examination. Her dress arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, delivered by Vivian personally, with an entourage of seamstresses who descended on Evelyn's suite like elegant vultures. The gown was everything she'd asked for: simple ivory silk that draped like water, elegant without trying too hard, sophisticated enough to match the gravity of what she was actually doing. When she tried it on, even Elena stopped scrolling through her phone to stare. "You look like someone who could actually be Mrs. Bellini," the teenager said, and it was possibly the highest compliment she'd given yet. The nights were the hardest. Evelyn would lie in her enormous bed in the East Wing, listening to the house settle around her, knowing Victor was somewhere on the other side of the mansion, probably not sleeping either. Twice she'd wandered downstairs at 3 in the morning and found him in his study, surrounded by security reports and business documents, a glass of whiskey keeping him company. They'd talk. About nothing important, about everything important, until exhaustion finally claimed them both. Those conversations felt more intimate than anything physical could have been. Victor told her about his father's brutality, about inheriting an empire built on fear and learning to maintain it through strategic intelligence rather than just violence. Evelyn shared stories about her parents, about choosing social work because she'd wanted to fix things her father, the teacher, and mother, the nurse, couldn't reach. They were learning each other, piece by careful piece, building something neither had planned for. 5 days before the wedding, the Costello family made their move. It happened during one of Evelyn's rare trips outside the estate, a visit to Hope Harbor's office to meet with her supervisor and discuss her transition to a consulting role that would allow her to continue her work while acknowledging her new reality. Her security detail was with her, 2 former Special Forces soldiers who moved like shadows, but they couldn't prevent the car that ran the red light and T-boned their SUV at an intersection 3 blocks from the nonprofit's building. The impact was catastrophic. Evelyn's world became spinning metal and shattering glass, her body held in place by a seatbelt that felt like it was cutting her in half, screams that might have been hers or might have been the guards. Then silence, broken only by the hiss of a damaged radiator and distant sirens approaching. "Miss Carter." One of the guards, Marcus, the one who told her about his daughter's soccer games, appeared at her window, his face bloody but focused. "We need to move. Now. That wasn't an accident." Evelyn's training from weeks of security briefings kicked in despite her disorientation. She unbuckled with shaking hands, let Marcus pull her from the wreckage, while his partner provided cover with a weapon she hadn't known he was carrying. A second SUV pulled up, backup that had been following at a distance, and she was being pushed inside while Marcus barked orders into his phone. "Base, we have a hostile intercept at Madison and 5th. Package is secure, but we need immediate extraction and medical. I'm calling Priority Alpha." Priority Alpha. Evelyn remembered that code from the briefings. It meant direct threat to a principal family member, all resources deployed, Victor personally notified within 60 seconds. The backup vehicle drove with controlled urgency through streets that seemed suddenly full of potential threats. Evelyn's hands wouldn't stop shaking, adrenaline making her entire body feel electric and numb simultaneously. Marcus kept pressure on a cut above his eyebrow, while simultaneously coordinating their route with dispatch, professional even with blood running down his face. They were 15 minutes from the estate when her encrypted phone rang. Victor's number. "Are you hurt?" No greeting, no preamble, just the essential question delivered with barely controlled intensity. "I don't think so. Bruised from the seatbelt, possibly whiplash, but nothing broken." Evelyn's voice sounded remarkably steady, given that she'd just survived what was apparently an assassination attempt. "Marcus is bleeding and the other guard, I don't know his name, Rodriguez. He's being taken to our medical facility. Marcus stays with you until you're inside the estate walls." Victor's breathing was audible, like he was moving quickly while talking. "I'm en route to you now. Stay on the line." "Victor, I'm okay. The guards did their job perfectly. You were hit by a car driven by someone on the Costello payroll. They tried to kill you, Evelyn. To get to me through you." The raw fury in his voice was controlled but absolute. "So no, you're not okay. You're targeted, and that means everything changes." The rest of the drive passed with Victor's voice in her ear, not saying much, just maintaining connection like a lifeline. When they finally pulled through the estate gates, he was waiting on the steps with a medical team, his expression locked down tight, but his eyes burning with something that looked like fear masked as rage. He pulled Evelyn from the car himself, hands running over her arms and shoulders, checking for injuries with surprising gentleness. "You're sure you're not hurt?" "I'm sure. Victor, I'm fine." "You were almost killed." He said it quietly, his hand still on her shoulders like he needed the physical confirmation she was real. "They tried to take you from me before I even got to marry you." The possessiveness in his voice should have alarmed her. Instead, it settled something in Evelyn's chest, a certainty that this man who made people disappear for crossing him would burn down the entire city to keep her safe. "But they didn't. Your people protected me. The system worked." The system almost failed. Victor finally released her, stepping back to let the medical team examine her properly. "Marcus, report." The guard gave a concise accounting of the attack, the timing too precise to be coincidence, the driver's identification as a known Costello associate, the backup vehicle that had shadowed them, suggesting coordination. As he spoke, Victor's expression grew progressively darker, and Evelyn recognized the look from her research into his reputation. This was Victor Bellini calculating retribution, planning response with the same strategic precision he applied to everything. "Dad?" Elena appeared from somewhere inside, her face pale but composed. "Is she okay?" "She's okay." Victor's voice softened marginally when addressing his daughter. "Take her inside. Stay with her until I get back." "Where are you going?" Evelyn asked, though she already knew the answer. "To have a conversation with the Costello family about appropriate boundaries and the consequences for crossing them." Victor was already moving toward one of the waiting vehicles, his security team falling into formation around him. "Elena, you're in charge of the household until I return. Standard lockdown protocols." "Victor, wait!" Evelyn caught his arm, stopping him mid-stride. "Don't do anything that can't be undone. Please." He looked down at where her hand gripped his sleeve, then up at her face with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You're asking me to show restraint to people who just tried to kill you." "I'm asking you not to start a war 5 days before our wedding." Evelyn held his gaze, refusing to look away from the darkness she saw there. "I'm asking you to be smart, instead of just being brutal." Something shifted in Victor's expression. Surprise, maybe respect, maybe something else entirely. "I'll be smart, but I won't be merciful. There's a difference." He covered her hand with his briefly, the touch warm and grounding. "Go inside. Lock yourself in your rooms until I come back. That's not a request." Then he was gone. 3 vehicles peeling out of the estate with the kind of speed that suggested violence was imminent. Elena guided Evelyn inside with gentle insistence, past staff who'd activated protocols that transformed the mansion into something resembling a military installation. Windows shuttered with steel reinforcements, doors locked with systems that probably cost more than most people's houses, security teams patrolling with weapons no longer bothered to conceal. "This is what Code Alpha looks like," Elena explained as they climbed the stairs. "Full defensive posture until Dad declares the threat neutralized. Usually lasts a few hours, sometimes a few days. We have everything we need inside: food, water, medical supplies, enough ammunition to hold off a small army." The casual mention of ammunition made Evelyn's head spin. "How many times have you lived through this?" "Code Alpha specifically? This is the 4th time. 3 times when I was younger, once when a rival tried to kidnap me from school, twice when threats were made against the family." Elena's matter-of-fact delivery of such horrifying information reinforced how different her childhood had been. Usually Dad resolves things quickly. He's very efficient when people make it personal. In Evelyn's suite, Elena raided the mini-fridge that had been stocked with expensive water and snacks, settling into the window seat like they were having a normal afternoon chat instead of locked in during a security crisis. "You told Dad not to start a war. That was brave and probably stupid." "I don't want people dying because someone tried to hurt me." Evelyn accepted the water Elena offered, her hand still trembling slightly. "Isn't there a way to resolve this without more violence?" "In Dad's world? Not really. Someone made a play against him through you. If he doesn't respond decisively, he looks weak, and weakness gets you killed in this business." Elena studied her future stepmother with those 2 knowing eyes. "But you asking him to be smart instead of just brutal? That might actually work. Dad respects intelligence and he respects you. He might actually listen. Or he might ignore me completely, and do whatever he was planning anyway. Maybe. Probably. Elena's slight smile was sad. But you tried. That's more than most people do. Most people around Dad just let him be the monster because it's easier than asking him to be something else. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Evelyn tried to work, to read, to do anything that would occupy her mind beyond imagining what Victor was doing to the people who'd tried to kill her. Elena dozed on the couch, teenage resilience allowing her to sleep through stress that had Evelyn's nerves stretched to breaking. Outside, the sun set in colors that looked too beautiful for a day that had included attempted murder. It was nearly midnight when Evelyn heard vehicles returning, the sound of garage doors opening and security teams standing down from high alert. She was at her door before thinking better of it, pulling it open to find Victor standing in the hallway like he'd been about to knock. He looked tired, his suit jacket gone and sleeves rolled up, a smudge of something dark on his collar that might have been blood. "Are you hurt?" Evelyn asked, the question immediate. "No, not my blood." Victor glanced past her to where Elena was sitting up on the couch, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "The Costello family and I have reached an understanding. They've agreed to leave you alone, to respect that you're under my protection. They've also agreed to deliver the driver who hit your car to my people for questioning. And in exchange?" Evelyn knew there had to be a trade, some negotiation that had prevented all-out war. "In exchange, I don't reduce their operations to rubble, and I consider their message about Noah being a liability received and acknowledged." Victor's expression was carefully neutral. "Apparently, my son's girlfriend has been feeding them information that's cost them money. They wanted me to know, so I deal with the problem internally rather than them having to make a more permanent statement." The implications settled over Evelyn like ice water. Jessica had been compromised not just by the Costellos, but actively working against them, putting both families in jeopardy through her duplicity. And the Costellos' attempted hit on Evelyn had been a warning shot, a brutal way of saying, "Control your family, or we'll control them for you." "So Jessica's the real target," Evelyn said slowly. "I was just collateral damage in their message to you about Noah. You were leverage they thought they could use to force my hand. They were wrong." Victor's voice hardened. "But yes, Jessica's compromised position with both families has made her a liability no one can afford. Noah's been warned to end their relationship immediately or face consequences from multiple directions. Will he listen? Doubtful. He thinks love conquers all." Victor's sardonic tone made clear what he thought of that philosophy. "But that's his problem to solve now. Mine is making sure you survive to actually become my wife in 5 days." Elena had appeared at Evelyn's shoulder, listening with the focused attention of someone cataloging information for future use. "So we're still having the wedding? Even after someone tried to kill Evelyn today?" "Especially after that." Victor's expression was granite. "Canceling would signal weakness, would suggest the Costellos succeeded in disrupting our plans. The wedding happens as scheduled, with security so tight that not even air gets through without clearance." "Where?" Evelyn asked, realizing she had no idea where the ceremony was even supposed to take place anymore after all the location changes. "Here. The gardens, as you originally wanted. We've swept the entire estate, upgraded every security system, and I'll have a small army positioned as guests and staff." Victor's slight smile held no humor. "It won't be the intimate ceremony Vivian planned, but it'll be secure." The conversation felt surreal, discussing wedding plans hours after surviving an assassination attempt. Talking about security forces disguised as guests like this was normal preparation for matrimony, but this was Evelyn's life now. The world she'd chosen when she'd agreed to marry Victor Bellini for revenge that had somehow evolved into something far more complicated. "I should let you rest," Victor said, though he made no move to leave. "Tomorrow we'll need to finalize everything. The ceremony itself, the vows, the practical details that got lost in today's chaos." "Victor." Evelyn caught his hand before he could retreat, the touch impulsive but necessary. "Thank you for protecting me, for not starting a war when you had every reason to." "I came very close to starting a war." His admission was quiet, honest. "The only thing that stopped me was remembering you asking me to be smart instead of brutal. So I was both. Smart enough to negotiate, brutal enough that they'll never try this again." "What did you do to make that guarantee?" "Things I won't tell you about because you don't need that weight on your conscience." Victor turned his hand under hers, their fingers interlacing briefly. Sleep, Evelyn. In 5 days, you'll be my wife and under my protection permanently. Until then, you don't leave this estate for any reason. He left before she could argue, Elena following him after a quick hug that surprised Evelyn with its fierceness. I'm glad you're okay. It would have been really annoying to lose a stepmother before even officially getting one. Alone in her suite, Evelyn stood at the window looking out over gardens that would soon host her wedding. The grounds were dotted with security teams now, discreet but visible if you knew what to look for. This was her future. Beauty surrounded by vigilance, luxury protected by violence, a life that required constant awareness of threats most people never even considered. She should have been terrified. 5 days ago, someone had tried to kill her. 5 days from now, she'd be legally bound to a man whose enemies would see her as a permanent target. But standing there with Victor's grandmother's ring on her finger and the memory of his concern warming her chest, Evelyn felt something closer to determination than fear. The wedding preparations consumed the next 4 days with intensity that left no time for doubt or second-guessing. Vivienne arrived with her team, transforming the gardens into something that looked effortless but probably required logistical planning on par with military operations. White roses and purple calla lilies everywhere, a tent of billowing silk in case of weather, chairs arranged in intimate rows that could seat the 50 guests who'd been carefully vetted by Victor's security. The guest list itself was a study in strategic invitation, family allies who needed to witness the union, business associates whose presence reinforced the Bellini Empire's stability, and a handful of people from Evelyn's world, including her supervisor from Hope Harbor, who looked absolutely terrified throughout the entire rehearsal dinner. That dinner, held 2 nights before the wedding, was Evelyn's first real glimpse of Victor's world on full display. Men who looked like they'd stepped out of classic gangster films, women draped in jewels that could fund small nations, conversations conducted in coded language about business opportunities and territories that meant nothing and everything simultaneously. Elena navigated it with practiced ease, charm deployed like a weapon she'd learned to wield from infancy. And Victor presided over it all like the king he essentially was, managing relationships and displaying Evelyn at his side like she'd been there for years instead of weeks. His hand stayed at the small of her back throughout the evening, a possessive touch that announced ownership while somehow also feeling protective. People watched them with calculation, trying to assess whether this marriage was strength or weakness for the Bellini Empire. They're trying to figure out if you're my vulnerability or my advantage, Victor murmured during a brief moment of privacy. Let them wonder. Uncertainty is useful. The night before the wedding, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She wandered the mansion at 3 a.m. and found Victor in his study exactly where she'd expected, surrounded by papers and the ever-present glass of whiskey. He looked up when she entered, unsurprised by her appearance. Cold feet? He asked, gesturing for her to sit. More like racing thoughts. Evelyn settled into the chair across from his desk, accepting the whiskey he poured without being asked. Tomorrow I become Mrs. Victor Bellini. Tomorrow, everything changes permanently. You can still walk away. Even now, even this late, if you want out. I don't want out, Evelyn cut him off firmly. I'm not here because I have cold feet. I'm here because I wanted to see you before tomorrow becomes official, before we perform for 50 people and cameras and all the weight of what this marriage represents. Victor studied her for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. What do you need, Evelyn? Honesty, just for tonight, just between us. She leaned forward, holding his gaze. Do you regret this? Proposing to me, bringing me into your world, changing your relationship with your son forever? No? The answer came without hesitation. I regret that Noah forced my hand. I regret that violence touched you because of decisions I made. But I don't regret meeting you, and I won't regret marrying you. Even though this started as revenge? Especially because it started as revenge. That gave us both permission to be honest about what we wanted without pretending to emotions we weren't feeling. Victor set down his glass, his full attention on her. But I'll tell you something I haven't said before. What started as revenge has become something else for me. I respect you. I'm attracted to you. I find myself wanting to protect you, not because you're a strategic asset, but because the thought of you being hurt makes me capable of starting wars I'd normally avoid. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest in a way their carefully managed public relationship never was. Evelyn felt her heart hammering, The whiskey and late hour and proximity to this man who'd become so central to her life, all combining into something that felt dangerous and necessary. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Not of you, not anymore, but of how much this has all changed me, how easily I've adapted to your world. A month ago, I was someone who believed in simple goodness and straightforward morality. Now I'm marrying a criminal and sleeping soundly in a mansion protected by armed guards. What does that make me? Human, complicated, honest about the darkness that exists in everyone if circumstances push hard enough." Victor stood, moving around the desk to lean against it directly in front of her. "You haven't become a monster, Evelyn. You've just stopped pretending the world is simpler than it actually is. Is that what you tell yourself? That you're just being honest about human nature? I tell myself that I protect what's mine, that I honor my agreements, and that I've created something stable in an inherently unstable world." Victor's voice was quiet but certain. "You can judge that however you want. But tomorrow, when you become my wife, you become part of that stability, part of what I protect." Evelyn stood, closing the small distance between them until they were close enough that she could feel his warmth, smell his cologne that had become familiar over weeks of proximity. "And what do I get in return? Besides protection and power and all the practical benefits we negotiated?" "What do you want?" Victor asked, and the question felt weighted with possibilities neither of them had been brave enough to voice until now. Instead of answering with words, Evelyn leaned up and kissed him. It was impulsive and possibly stupid, and definitely complicated, but his lips were warm against hers, and when his hands came up to frame her face, the touch was gentle in a way that contrasted sharply with his reputation for brutality. The kiss deepened slowly, carefully, like they were both aware this crossed some invisible line, but neither wanted to stop. When they finally broke apart, Victor's expression was unguarded in a way Evelyn had never seen. "That's dangerous." "Everything about this is dangerous. At least this is dangerous in a way that feels honest." Evelyn stepped back, creating space before they could complicate things further. "Tomorrow we get married. After that, whatever this becomes, we figure it out together." "Together," Victor agreed, the word carrying the weight of promise. Evelyn left before she could do something even more reckless, climbing the stairs to her suite with the taste of him still on her lips, and the certainty that tomorrow would change everything in ways she was only beginning to understand. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, like someone had ordered the weather specifically to match the occasion. Evelyn woke to find her suite filled with people: hairstylists, makeup artists, Vivian coordinating everything with military precision, and Elena watching it all with amused detachment while eating pastries that probably cost more than regular people's weekly groceries. "You look terrified," Elena observed cheerfully. "That's normal, right? Isn't that what brides are supposed to feel?" "I think brides are usually nervous about committing their lives to someone, not about whether their groom's enemies will attack during the ceremony." But Evelyn smiled despite the nerves jangling through her system. "How do I look?" "Like someone who could absolutely be Mrs. Bellini. Sophisticated, powerful, slightly dangerous." Elena's approval was clear. "Dad's going to lose his mind when he sees you." The dress fit perfectly after a week of final alterations, the ivory silk draping in elegant lines that made Evelyn look taller, older, like someone who belonged in the world she was entering. The makeup was subtle but transformative, highlighting features she'd never paid much attention to. Her hair was styled in soft waves that looked effortless but had required an hour of work. When Vivienne finally declared her ready, Evelyn barely recognized her own reflection. The woman in the mirror looked confident, composed, like she'd been born to wear designer gowns and marry powerful men. The transformation was complete in ways that went beyond just physical appearance. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 in the afternoon, golden hour lighting that would photograph beautifully and provide enough time for security to do final sweeps. As the hour approached, Evelyn stood at the window of her suite looking down at gardens that had been transformed into something magical, flowers and silk, and chairs filled with guests who represented the full spectrum of Victor's complex world. A knock came at precisely 3:30. Elena answered it, then turned back with a strange expression. "Noah's here. He's asking to speak with you before the ceremony." Every alarm bell in Evelyn's head started ringing. "Where's security? Where's Victor?" "Security is with him. Dad's in his study getting ready. Noah claims he just wants 5 minutes to say goodbye properly. that he accepts this is happening and he wants to apologize. Elena's skepticism was clear. I can tell him to leave. No, let him come up, but stay in the room. Evelyn made the decision quickly, knowing it was possibly stupid, but feeling like she owed Noah this much. One final conversation before they crossed into being family in the most twisted way imaginable. Noah appeared in the doorway looking better than he had during his last visit. Sober, composed, wearing a suit that suggested he'd made an effort. But his eyes held a darkness that made Evelyn grateful Elena was staying close. You look beautiful, Noah said quietly. You always did, but this is different. You look like you belong in this world now. What do you want, Noah? Evelyn kept her voice level, not unkind, but not welcoming either. To apologize. Really apologize. Not the drunk rambling from before. Noah stepped further into the room, but maintained distance, aware of Elena watching him like a hawk. I was an idiot. I treated you like you were disposable because I could, because you were good and forgiving, and I took that for granted. You deserved better than what I gave you. Yes, I did. Evelyn accepted the apology without softening. Is that all? I also wanted to warn you. Noah's expression grew serious, worried in a way that seemed genuine. Jessica's disappeared. Nobody's seen her in 3 days. The Costellos are looking for her, Dad's people are looking for her, and I'm terrified about what it means that she's just vanished. The information sent ice through Evelyn's veins. Jessica, who'd betrayed everyone she'd touched, who'd become a liability to multiple dangerous organizations, was missing. The implications were stark and terrifying. Why are you telling me this? Evelyn asked. Because whatever happens to her is partially my fault for being too blind to see what she was. But it's also partially yours for setting this whole thing in motion. Noah's voice cracked slightly. I know you hate her. I know she hurt you. But she's still a person, and if something happens to her because of this war between families, I didn't start this war. You did when you brought someone into our lives who was using both of us for her own agenda. Evelyn felt anger rising, sharp and clean. Don't put Jessica's choices on me, Noah. Don't make me responsible for consequences that stem from her own duplicity. You're right. You're absolutely right. Noah ran a hand through his hair, the gesture achingly familiar. I just needed to tell someone. I needed you to know that this thing we're all caught in has casualties beyond just our relationship. Before Evelyn could respond, the door opened and Victor appeared, taking in the scene with instant assessment. His expression darkened, seeing Noah and Evelyn's suite, but his voice remained controlled. It's time. Evelyn, the ceremony starts in 10 minutes. Noah, you're welcome to attend if you can behave yourself, or you can leave. Choose now. Noah looked between them. His father in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, Evelyn in her wedding gown, the reality of what was about to happen settling over him with visible weight. I'll stay. I need to see this through, to accept that it's really happening. Then take your seat. Elena, escort him. Victor waited until his son and daughter left before turning his full attention to Evelyn. Are you okay? What did he want? To apologize. To warn me about Jessica disappearing. Evelyn studied Victor's face, looking for reaction to that news. Did you know she was missing? I know where she is. She's being held by the Costellos until they decide what to do with her. Victor's voice was matter-of-fact. That's not your concern right now. Right now, your only concern is walking down those stairs and marrying me in front of 50 witnesses who will spread the word that this union is legitimate and permanent. And after the ceremony and the reception and all the performance, after, we start building whatever this marriage actually becomes. Victor offered his arm with old-fashioned courtesy. Ready? Evelyn took his arm, feeling the solid warmth of him through the expensive fabric of his tuxedo. Ready. The walk through the mansion and into the gardens felt both endless and instantaneous. Guests rose as she appeared, all eyes tracking her progress toward where Victor waited under an arch of white roses and silk that billowed gently in the late afternoon breeze. The string quartet played something classical and beautiful, and the whole scene looked like a fairy tale if you ignored the security teams positioned at strategic points, and the fact that half the guests were probably armed. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. A judge, vetted and probably on Victor's payroll, spoke about commitment and partnership and building lives together. Victor's vows were simple, promising protection and respect and honesty. His voice steady and clear for all witnesses to hear. When it was Evelyn's turn, she looked into the eyes of the man she was binding herself to and spoke from a place deeper than strategy or revenge. I promise to stand beside you, to be honest even when it's difficult, to build something real from what started as calculation, to become your partner in every way that matters. The words felt like truth, like commitment that went beyond what they'd originally negotiated. Victor's expression shifted hearing those vows, something warming behind his eyes that suggested he heard what she wasn't saying, that this had become real for her, that somewhere between revenge and security, she'd started actually caring about this complicated, dangerous man. When the judge pronounced them married and invited Victor to kiss his bride, he did so with a thoroughness that suggested the kiss was far more than just performance. Evelyn felt herself responding, felt weeks of careful distance collapsing into this moment of sanctioned intimacy. And when they finally broke apart, the guests were applauding, and she was officially Mrs. Victor Bellini. The reception was elegant chaos. Speeches from allies, toasts from people who praised Victor's business acumen while carefully avoiding mentioning what that business actually entailed, and dancing that felt surreal, given that some of the guests were literally criminals celebrating a marriage that had started as an act of revenge. Elena gave a surprisingly touching speech about gaining a stepmother who wasn't afraid to challenge her father, who might actually make him happy in ways his first marriage never had. And through it all, Noah sat at a table near the back, watching with an expression that cycled through pain and acceptance and something that might have been genuine happiness for Evelyn finding something that worked for her, even if it destroyed him in the process. As the evening wound down and guests began filtering out with gifts and good wishes and promises to attend future family gatherings, Evelyn found herself alone with Victor for the first time as his actual wife. They stood in the gardens as staff cleaned up around them, the tent glowing with soft lights that made everything look magical. "So we did it," Evelyn said softly. "We actually got married." "We did." Victor pulled her closer, his arm around her waist in a way that felt natural now. "Any regrets?" "Ask me in a year when I've had time to fully process what I've done." But Evelyn smiled, leaning into his warmth. "What about you? Regrets about marrying a woman half your age for revenge against your son?" "I married you because you're brave and smart and beautiful, and you challenge me in ways I didn't know I needed." Victor's voice was quiet, honest in a way it rarely was with others around. "The revenge was just an excuse to get you here. Everything after has been about keeping you." The confession settled over Evelyn like a physical touch, warm and weighty. She tilted her face up, kissing him with the freedom of someone who didn't need to justify or explain or apologize for wanting this dangerous man who'd become her husband. "Take me inside," she murmured against his lips. "Show me what being Mrs. Bellini actually means." Victor's smile was sharp and promising. "With pleasure." 3 months later, the Bellini mansion had settled into a new normal that Evelyn navigated with increasing confidence. Jessica had been released by the Costellos with a warning that sent her fleeing to another state. Her relationship with Noah dissolved and her reputation in ruins. Noah himself had pulled back from family business, taken an apartment across the city, and was reportedly seeing a therapist to process his complicated feelings about his father marrying his ex-girlfriend. Elena visited every few weeks, splitting time between California and the estate, and had started calling Evelyn by name instead of carefully avoiding any title that acknowledged their relationship. The teenager was thriving with a stepmother who actually engaged with her, who asked hard questions and gave honest answers and didn't try to replace her actual mother. Evelyn's work at Hope Harbor expanded exponentially with proper funding and political connections that came from being married to Victor Bellini. She helped more trafficking victims in 3 months than she'd been able to reach in 3 years before. And if the money came from morally questionable sources, she'd learned to accept that good could come from complicated places. And her marriage, the arrangement that had started as revenge and evolved into something neither of them had planned for, had become real in ways that surprised them both. They'd moved from separate wings to shared rooms, from careful distance to genuine partnership, from strategic alliance to something that looked remarkably like love, even if neither of them was quite ready to name it that. One evening, Evelyn sat in Victor's study, their study now, with her desk positioned opposite his, reviewing case files while he worked through business reports. The domestic normalcy of it would have seemed impossible 3 months ago, but now it felt right, comfortable. "I got a message from Noah today," Victor said without looking up from his papers. "He's dating someone new. A lawyer who apparently has no connections to organized crime and actually challenges him to be better. He wanted us to know he's moving on. Good for him. Evelyn meant it genuinely. He deserves to find someone who fits his world better than I ever did. You fit this world perfectly now. Victor finally looked up, his expression warm with pride and something deeper. You've become exactly what I knew you could be. Powerful without losing your compassion, strong without becoming cruel. Mrs. Bellini suits you. It does, doesn't it? Evelyn smiled, twisting the ring on her finger that no longer felt heavy or foreign. Though I think I've earned the right to go by Evelyn Bellini professionally. Sounds more impressive than Mrs. when I'm negotiating with politicians about trafficking prevention funding. Evelyn Bellini. Victor tested the name, his smile growing. I like it. Sounds like someone who gets things done. Later that night, wrapped in sheets that cost more than her old apartment's monthly rent, Evelyn reflected on the transformation that had brought her here. From heartbreak in Noah's bedroom to partnership in Victor's, from victim to survivor to something more complex than either category could contain. She'd sought revenge and found purpose. She'd married for strategy and discovered genuine connection. She'd entered a world built on violence and learned to navigate it without losing herself completely. The future stretched ahead, uncertain and dangerous and nothing like what she'd planned. But lying beside a man who'd become far more than just her husband in name, Evelyn felt something close to contentment settling into her bones. She'd stopped being the person things happened to and become someone who made things happen instead. And that transformation, painful and complicated and absolutely necessary, had been worth every risk. What are you thinking about? Victor asked, his voice rough with approaching sleep. That I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Evelyn turned to face him in the darkness. That what started as the worst day of my life led to the best decision I've ever made. Marrying me? His tone was amused, affectionate. Choosing myself, choosing power, choosing to stop being afraid of who I might become and just becoming her anyway. Evelyn kissed him softly. You were just the catalyst. The transformation was all mine. Then I'm honored to have witnessed it. Victor pulled her closer, his arms a fortress she no longer needed but chose to remain within. Welcome home, Mrs. Bellini. Welcome to the life you built from the ashes of the one that burned down. Evelyn closed her eyes, listening to his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her ear, and smiled into the darkness. She was home. Not the home she'd imagined, but the one she'd earned through courage and calculation and the willingness to become dangerous when necessary. The betrayal that had shattered everything had also rebuilt her into something stronger, and that, more than revenge, more than security, more than anything else, made every complicated choice worth it. She'd walked into Noah's bedroom expecting answers and found devastation. She'd walked into Victor's world expecting temporary vengeance and found permanent transformation. And now, 3 months into a marriage that had started as strategy and evolved into partnership, Evelyn had finally become exactly who she was always meant to be. Powerful. Protected. Free. And absolutely, completely herself.